I've been asked to do a clip on what you could do when your child runs away from the table and locks themselves up in their bedroom. This happens, it's common enough. First of all, I suggest you unscrew locks from bedroom doors and bathroom doors. That way there's no big drama if you really want to enter a room to check that your child is safe. Now, seating arrangements. It's a good idea if yourself and others sit in a way that contains your child a little bit so that it's a little bit harder for them to run away. They would have to really push past you. So you're kind of in the way of the exit. I'm talking about a psychological deterrent here. I'm really not advocating that you physically stop your child from leaving the table. That won't work long term. It will just escalate the violence. As you see your child standing up and about to run away, you can be very firm and say, "Stay here, darling. Stay here. Sit down. Sit back down. I don't want you to leave. We're going to help you. It's okay." And it might work or it might not, and your child might still storm off. And what do you do if they've gone off to their bedroom? First thing is empathy for yourselves. You've got a few minutes before you need to react. You can calm yourselves down, you can give your partner a hug, and remember that this is really hard. Others have gone through it, and our kids still get well in spite of all this drama. So take a couple of minutes for self-empathy, to be kind to yourselves, so that you can be in the best possible, wisest place for your child. You can now gently speak on the other side of your child's door, unless, of course, you sense that it's absolutely fine to come in, and say, "Sweetie, I'm here for you. What's up, darling? Would you like a couple more minutes on your own? Or would it be nice if I was here with you?" And don't panic if your child is using language that you've never heard before coming from their sweet little mouths. You don't need to take offense. You could say, "Okay, I'll leave you in peace for a few minutes. I'm not abandoning you. I'll come back in a few minutes to check how you are." And some kids really do calm down better on their own. With time, you'll know what works best for your child. Or you could say, "I'm just going to sit on the other side of your door, so you know you're not on your own." And then you can be silent for a little while. Or you could say, "How are you, sweetie? You got really freaked out by this meal, didn't you? I'm going to help you, you know?" Now, if you've been silent, if you've left your child for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can now come back and you can say, "How are you doing, darling?" And if you're still hearing major sobs or abuse, you can say, "Okay, I'm just going to come in and see how you are. I'm really here to help you, sweetie." Because you're the wise parent, you need to keep the focus on whatever the next step is to get your child to eat. Things need to keep moving forward. So you come in and maybe you stay just at the door and you give some more words of empathy, even though your child may be in a very distressed or aggressive state. Perhaps this image would help you. You've come across an injured wild animal and you're approaching very gently. You need to help them and they're very scared and they're going to bite. So you're going step by step, really showing that you're trustworthy. "Okay, darling, you're really freaked out. I get it. Okay, now I'm with you and I want you to come down with me and I'll help you to get back to the table." So you're giving precise instructions, you're being directive, cutting through the chaos in your child's mind. You might judge the situation a bit differently and you might think, I can bring the food to my child in their bedroom. So you could then say, "Look, hang on here. Let's make this easier for you. Give me a minute and I'll bring the food. And if you want, you can curl up in bed and I'll help you while you eat the food in bed. Maybe we can also watch a movie or we can play a game." See if you can keep up the compassionate persistence using all the tools you have. If you've done your absolute best, then at some stage use the art of ending a meal without blame. And there is a clip in this collection to help you with that. There are also clips dealing with your child having meltdowns, with your child being abusive, with them being locked up in their room. In another clip, I suggested that there is a role for silence during a meal, that maybe that helps your child to psych themselves up to have the next bite. But what about when your child is going, "You're making it worse by asking me to eat. I could eat so much better if you just backed off and shut up. I can eat this meal myself, so you just back off." Now, at this stage, you're thinking maybe she's giving me a useful hint, and great. Or is she busy manipulating me into complete silence and then she won't eat? Here's my conversation with some parents. Keep your wits about you. You can always sympathize, always empathize for the, you want to do it your own way. You're 13. It's really rubbish having your parents tell you what to do. So I'm going to shut up. Fair enough. And at the same time, keep your wits about you that empathy isn't about giving in. It's not about being, kindness isn't about then not taking action. As parents, our role is to be kind and nurturing and firm for what our kids need. And very clearly with anorexia, they need to eat. So kind, okay, yeah, you don't want me to keep babbling on about you've got to have the next mouthful, fine. And then after a few minutes you go, I've not said anything, but you haven't had a bite yet, so can you get on? And then I'll be quiet again. I mean, you could make it a bit playful. I'm kind of making this up, but it's just so you keep on track all the same. So overall, think on your toes, keep your flexibility, your instincts, your sense of humor, if at all possible. You don't need to be rigid about your responses, and at the same time, remain vigilant that your son or daughter must eat one way or another. If they find it easier to eat while you're being quiet, great. If they're still not eating, then you intervene. And just to be clear, in my view, you stay there, you observe. You don't back off to the extent that you let your son or daughter eat somewhere else and you're supposed to just believe them. The illness is supposed to make them lie and cheat, so don't set them up for failure. A helpful principle to establish right from the start, whether it's in your head or whether you voice it, is that if you haven't seen the food go in, as far as you're concerned, it hasn't. At least in the early days, until your son or daughter is generally able to eat quite easily. When parents start taking charge of getting their child to eat, they encounter a lot of resistance typically. That's really normal. And then they ask, how long can I expect this high resistance to continue, and how long before I avert the weight loss? How much before I start getting weight gain? The answer is, how long is a piece of string? On the whole, a really good therapist will be aiming to get you off and running 0.5 kilo to 1 kilogram per week and go on at that rate with that momentum till you've got weight recovery. Sometimes there's a bit of a knife edge, a bit of a race where the child is maybe stuck, the feeding hasn't worked for several weeks, or maybe the child is continuing to lose weight that you would take action on much faster. And it might also be that their medical state is worsening. So in those situations, you're racing against time because at a certain junction, you're going to get good professional advice that they need to be in hospital. And nowadays, it might just mean a very short hospital spell, sometimes a few days, sometimes 2-3 weeks. It turns your child around, they manage to eat, they start getting nourished, and then you're ready to take charge at home again. Keep up your courage, keep your determination to turn this ship around. It goes more or less fast for different families, and that's either because their son or daughter has been affected by the illness to a different degree, or you need more support in terms of your own coaching, your own reading, your own education. It could be the support that the therapists are giving you. So if things are not progressing within a few days, ask for the support and really build that speed. I really want to say how much I feel for you if you're stuck. We were stuck with my little girl when she was 10, to the extent that she was in hospital for 11 months. And that was purely because whenever she was home, we couldn't get her to eat reliably. And apart from that, she was really well, perfectly happy in the hospital. We kept asking for coaching and we didn't get it. You differ from my situation because nowadays there are resources everywhere, including the resources that I provide. So you're not so dependent on whether your particular team of therapists is going to coach you to make meals succeed or not. I really wish you lots of successes very soon. How many meals should you serve your child when you're in the first phase of treatment and you've taken charge? The most standard recommendation is 3 meals and 2 or 3 snacks a day. 3 snacks is more common, and that is because it will help you get enough food in throughout the day if you're aiming for weight gain. And even if in your case you're not having to aim for weight gain, the really regular meals help reduce the power of the eating disorder. As the body gets hungry, the mind gets obsessed about food, and that's a really healthy mechanism. The body wants to survive and it thinks, hey, we're starving here. There's not a regular food supply. We're in famine. And because your child has an eating disorder and their brain isn't functioning the way other people's brains work, you get the restricting mind then kicking in. And that can go several ways. You can get very strong opposition to the next meal, or you will get binging and then restriction, or you'll get binging and then purging, or binging and then a lot of guilt, which leads to restrictive thoughts and efforts for a few hours or something, and then more binging because the thoughts are unbearable. So whatever the eating disorder, if you're helping your child to eat every 3 or 4 hours, you are helping them to step out of the vicious cycle of I eat, I don't eat, I'm always thinking about food, I restrict more, I binge. And this is not just with home-based treatment, with parents in charge. This is very much at the center of CBT, that's cognitive behavioral therapy for eating disorders, regular meals. We saw this very clearly with our daughter at a particular stage where she seemed extremely well. She kind of looked recovered. But on a couple of occasions we went on holiday, we were skiing and we were busy, and a few hours more went by than they should have. And it was just like night and day how her eating disorder thinking resurfaced. She got all grumpy and she said, I don't need to eat, I'm not hungry. It's like a switch. Now, as your child really gets well and properly recovered, they will have a lot more resilience to having bigger gaps between meals every now and again. But the general rule to eat every 3 or 4 hours is a really good one for stability of mind and body. Note that because of this, it means that if your child is going into school, you really need to set things up to make sure that they actually eat their snack and their lunch. I know parents who have thought that as long as there's a big breakfast and then there's a big tea time and overall there's enough calories, then they think that should be enough. But no, their child has remained stuck that way. You might also want to be ready for an argument that if your child is given food in big quantities every 3 or 4 hours, then they're never hungry. So, of course, then that in itself might be a reason for them to fight your meals. At one stage, I had a well-meaning friend who made that point. And it kind of makes sense, except that this is a person who has an eating disorder. They're not ready to be motivated by hunger. They would fight meals whether or not they felt hungry. The feeling of hunger will come back much later. Hunger is not your main tool. The tool is regularity. And unfortunately, the message is you eat even if you're not hungry during this phase. Also bear in mind that you and I have no idea how hungry our child actually is. We do know that there is a stage of extreme hunger among people who have been restricting and who have lost weight. They feel they could never eat enough and they could go on and on being hungry forever. And in fact, we've seen that with people who don't even have an eating disorder and have starved. So you and I should not assume that our child is not hungry just because we're feeding them a lot and often. So regular meals, really important. Let's talk about how much to serve your child. I've done a few other clips on what to serve, what kinds of foods, how often, and now let's think about the quantities. You've got to give your child enough food that their needs are met as soon as possible. So if they need to regain weight, as soon as possible, you want to serve meals that will lead to the weight gain. You don't want to take forever over this, even though your child is very scared of it. In order to gain weight at the kind of rate that we need, usually our children need more calories than they used to have before they had an eating disorder. They might need more calories than their siblings. It is usually quite a bit more than you as an adult need to eat. Sometimes it's just a little bit more, and sometimes it's several times more, either what you eat or what your child used to eat before the eating disorder struck. The only way that you will know if it's enough is to do it and then adjust as time goes on. Our children differ quite a bit, so you do it by experimenting. Know that the weight gain may not be linear, so don't jump to immediate conclusions just from one weighing. At the beginning, our children can weight gain quite fast just because they're starting to get fluids again. Then it might get a little bit slower and you'll think, actually it's not quite enough, so let's increase the calories. It should be possible in a home setting to have your child gain between 0.5 kilo and 1 kilo a week. That's 1 or 2 pounds. A hospital would normally be expected to go a bit faster. Now, this might be the right place to mention the dreaded refeeding syndrome. This is about a serious medical danger that can happen when people who were seriously underfed suddenly get refed too quickly, too much. So for that, you would get medical help. This can be checked for, and I've done another audio clip on refeeding syndrome. And for now, I assume that you're getting good medical follow-up, that your child is safe, and that you can really start feeding for rapid weight gain. You're giving your child the best chances of a swift recovery by getting rapid weight gain right from the start. Yes, it will be scary for your child, and that's why you learn skills in supporting your child and making it bearable. You don't stay dictated to by an eating disorder, which is putting them at great danger. So, plenty of food. You don't need to count calories. You don't need to make it super scientific. Serve generous portions and see if you're getting the required weight gain, and if you're not, increase the portions. If you're getting more weight gain than you thought, celebrate, keep going. Don't reduce the portions. There is no such thing as going too fast. When we're talking about refeeding from a very starved state, we have to talk about refeeding syndrome. Your son or daughter needs to be checked medically, and you may be told to guard against refeeding syndrome by being very slow in how you refeed them. Refeeding syndrome refers to medical complications when you get potentially very deadly low levels of phosphorus, other electrolyte imbalances, and edema, levels of fluid in various body tissues. It can be fatal very suddenly. So obviously people are going to be extremely cautious about that. The way people are cautious could be with regular medical monitoring. It could be with supplementing phosphorus levels if levels are seen to be low. The risk has also been managed by refeeding very, very slowly. And that's where the question mark lies nowadays. I am not a medical person, so all I want to do is tell you a little bit what various experts are saying about it. The traditional view has been to check people medically at regular intervals with blood tests and start the nutrition at a pretty low calorie levels and increase it incredibly slowly. New voices from experts are coming up and more papers are being published saying, hang on here, we're doing more harm than good by going so slowly here. We're now going into underfeeding, undernutrition, keeping people ill for too long. So people are now writing papers where they're describing how refeeding syndrome is actually incredibly rare. And hospitals are reporting on how they've taken very ill people and put them straight away on, say, 1,400, 1,800 calories per day. By the way, when I say calories, I should always be saying kilocalories. And they increased it by 300 or 400 calories every few days. And they keep increasing the calories at that rate until they get the kind of speed of weight gain that is desired, which in a hospital in these studies might be as much as 1.5 kilos a week or even more. Just compare this with a home environment where the typical rate of weight gain, putting aside any risk of refeeding syndrome, is 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a week. If you can go faster, then great. Back to the papers published by hospitals, they report that they had no adverse electrolyte levels, they had no other adverse reactions. So all was good, even at that far more swift rate of refeeding than what has been done traditionally. I'm recording this in 2019, and if you're looking for references, that's all in my book, which is absolutely crammed with endnotes. So what's the take-home message? First of all, don't believe anything I say. I am not a doctor. Get the medical advice, because you and I don't know what the risks actually are for your own child. If you find that you're being prescribed very, very low calories, 500 calories a day or 1,000 calories a day for ages, then question it. Have the conversation with your medical team. Point out that there are all these voices saying, look, we need to hurry up and not overinflate the likelihood of refeeding syndrome. Let's talk about what food you should be serving. I'm assuming you're at the beginning of this journey, you've taken charge of the food, you're plating up the food, so you're deciding what to serve your child. So what should you serve them? Well, your aim is rapid weight gain if your child has lost weight. Doesn't matter how much at this stage, if they lost weight, they need to regain some. So you're aiming at 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a week at least. It's okay if you go faster. So you're going to need to give a lot of food. It's better to give dense food, calorie-dense food. So that will probably mean rich foods that are quite high in fat. That will allow you to pack more calories into a smaller volume, which will reduce the distress on your child's stomach and digestive system. A lot of our children at this stage have restricted all kinds of foods. So maybe by now your child hardly eats any carbohydrates or has stopped eating fats, anything sweet. And it may well be that part of their symptoms, mentally and physically, come from a big imbalance. Someone who hasn't been eating fats or carbohydrates in sufficient quantities is bound to suffer physically and mentally. So your aim is to give balanced meals. All the food groups need to be there. To give you an example, if at this moment your child is only eating fruit and vegetables or very low-fat foods, and even if they're eating big quantities of it, it's not okay. They need all the food groups and they need the calories. If you're needing inspiration, there are often recipes on parent forums. For ourselves, I remember serving quiches rather a lot, as well as bakes and spaghetti sauces and curry sauces, which had been enriched with cream that had been boiled down to a small volume. Another tip is to also make good use of fluids. So high-calorie smoothies, high-calorie milkshakes, those can make a really good addition to a family meal. So you could serve quite a normal-looking meal, generous but kind of normal, and that's what everyone is eating, but your child also has a good high-calorie milkshake. And a smoothie or a milkshake or milk that is not skimmed in any way are part of a really useful snack. Talking of which, all the food must be normal food now, in the sense it mustn't be a diet version. That's quite a cultural shift, I know, because we've been told that low-fat diet versions are healthier, and for total recovery we need to reverse the fear of fat and this diet culture. The new message is that all foods have a place in our lives. One little tip is to serve food that doesn't come out of a measured packet. So if you're serving a yogurt, tip the yogurt into a bowl and vary the bowls so it's not always the same bowl. If you've bought a smoothie, serve it in a glass and not always the same glass. This will help to stop this situation where your child wants to know they've got always the exact same quantity. It might make everybody's life a little bit easier as time goes on, a bit more flexibility. If your child has an eating disorder, there's a high chance that there's all kinds of foods that they find extremely frightening, and it's a complete no-no. And they say, I've never liked this, or I've become vegan, I'm not ever going to eat this or that. So I'll do another audio on fear foods and when you should be bringing them in. For the moment, the quick answer is that your priority is weight gain, if weight gain is needed, and balanced nutrition, so no food groups are excluded. Note also that in another audio clip, I explained how the meals must be frequent, so they must be every 3 or 4 hours, and that usually means 3 meals and 3 snacks every day. I want to acknowledge that all this takes a lot of courage from parents, and perhaps also for you a leap of faith. It's very common for parents not to dare to serve certain foods because they fear that their child will eat even less. So you have to trust that you have the ability to support your child to manage the meals with loving, kind persistence. This clip is about fear foods at the early stages, when you've started refeeding, you've started being in charge of the food. If your son or daughter has an eating disorder, it's highly likely there's all kinds of foods that they don't eat anymore. Sometimes these food rules, these restrictions, often these rules around so-called healthy eating, are at the origin of the weight loss, the mental disturbances, the eating disorder. Sometimes something else started off the eating disorder, and the eating disorder mindset creates ever-increasing rules around food. Maybe that's how your son or daughter became vegetarian or vegan. Maybe they're denying themselves any food that is lovely and delicious, any food that they consider fattening. Maybe they've stopped eating carbohydrates or fats, and they would never eat an ice cream. And yet, complete recovery is about being able to eat flexibly without rules. You've got to be able to enjoy birthday cake, for instance. So at some stage, your child's fear or resistance to certain foods or their rules to certain foods will have to lift. Some of them will go quite naturally as your child gets better from their eating disorder in general, and others will stick as mental rules and be really quite fearful for them. So you'll need to work at them by helping them have these foods and experiencing that they're actually okay, and maybe even what a relief it is to be able to eat these foods. So all this work on desensitizing, on exposing to fear foods will have to happen at some stage. However, the question is, do you do that right away? You're right at the beginning of refeeding. There's no absolute right or wrong to this. I think it's for you to be responsive to what will work for your child. Whenever you're in doubt, here's your guideline. Is what I'm doing going to get my child restored nutritionally? So that's full nutrients. You don't cut out fats or carbohydrates. That's no good for the body or the brain. And will it achieve any weight recovery that is required at a good rate, which at home means at least 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a week. So that's your compass point, rapid nutritional restoration. Because when you're well on the way towards that, a lot of your child's rules and fears and resistance will reduce. If your child at the moment is restricting on a huge number of foods, it may be you cannot meet your nutritional restoration aims without bringing in some fear foods. So for instance, if your child cannot bear to eat any fats, you've not got any chance of nutritional restoration. If that's the case, you have no choice but to bring in at least a few fearful foods right from the start. On the other hand, if your child is able to eat enough foods that you can meet the aims of nutritional restoration, then it's kind of up to you to get a sense of which fear foods you could bring in and when. One reason why it's great to do it sooner rather than later is that you're breaking down the rules before they get very, very ingrained. If your child hasn't eaten a potato in the last 6 months, then when you do bring a potato in, it may be extra hard. On the other hand, if you wait a little bit for the nutritional restoration, the brain becomes more flexible anyway. So you might be able to avoid a lot of the hard work of introducing fear foods if you wait a little bit and see when your child is in a better mental and physical space. So there's pros and cons there. And of course, if you bring in fear foods very early and your child is fighting them like mad and you're not yet very skilled and experienced at supporting the meals so that they work, you may end up with too many missed meals. So you're then losing your compass of rapid nutritional restoration. I hope that all these pros and cons haven't completely frazzled your brain. I know this is a time we can be very overwhelmed. So hang on to those nutritional goals and later on look out for another clip where I'll guide you through the process of introducing fear foods. Let's talk about if your son or daughter has become vegan or vegetarian as part of the eating disorder. So it happened around that time. Yes, they're going to say it's because they care for animals and they care for the world, which is something that we can really validate. It is sensitive and caring. And at the same time, this is not the moment to do it. So the message to your child will be compassion for their noble aims, as well as this is not for now. It can be reviewed later when your body and your mind are both securely well. If your family isn't vegetarian, it will reinforce the eating disorder that your child is eating something really different. You're all busy eating meat and your child has got their rules. You're reinforcing this inflexibility of the eating disorder. You're bearing in mind that your initial aims at the start of treatment are nutritional restoration. So that's nutrients and any weight gain that is required. So as soon as you can, bring in the meat or the dairy product that your child used to eat. As I record this, veganism has really taken off, and it may be that there will be more guidance around this. If you have really good reasons to allow your child to be vegan, then I really recommend you get very specialized help. The normal rule is if they became vegan as part of the eating disorder, you reverse that both for reasons of flexibility, breaking down the eating disorder's rules, and to get the nutrients and the weight gain. If your child and your family has been vegan or vegetarian for a long time, then that is your normal. Then the question is, especially with veganism, is it possible biologically to restore someone to health when they've been very malnourished? And I recommend you check that with a registered dietitian. With my daughter, we had been vegetarian all of her life, so it was absolutely fine for us to do her restoration with vegetarian foods. So if you decide that you do need to bring in meat or dairy, it's likely this will be very scary for all of you. So we'll put that in the category of fear foods. And I've got other clips for you on helping your child with fear foods, both the when and the how. I hope they will help you. Let's talk about exercise. When your child has been restricting, get some clarity from the clinicians on what exercise is okay or not okay from a medical point of view. It may be imperative that you intervene to stop your child's daily run or the school sports or even gentle walks. Then, even if your son or daughter is okay medically, if they're struggling to eat enough, your clinicians may tell you to prioritize weight gain and avoid any exercise simply because it burns up precious energy. Consider also that our children can feel exhausted and weak, and they will only give themselves the permission to rest if given no choice. They need that guilt taken away from them. Another reason to intervene in your child's sports is that for many, exercise is as much part of the eating disorder as food is. One of the aims of treatment is to free a person from any compulsion to exercise. Compulsive exercise or exercise to compensate for meals is a mental straitjacket. So even if your child is medically cleared for certain types of exercise, it's wise to regulate their physical activity in the same way as you regulate their food. Ultimately, you will be coaching them and guiding them to practice a new life-enhancing attitude to exercise and movement. I'll say more about that in another clip. But before you get to that, in a first phase, you may need to take charge of your child's exercise. If you're lucky, it will simply be a question of saying, "Darling, I'm really sorry, no running for a while, and I've also arranged for the school to excuse you from sports." As always, connect with empathy, listen to concerns, and problem solve while remaining firm about the ultimate aim. Be ready to review, of course. With my daughter, at first, we drove her to and from school. She did not have any spare energy to walk, and there was a risk that she would feel compelled to run. Later, when she was better, it was fine for her to walk with her friends. For some of us, there are times it seems almost impossible to stop our children from exercising. Such is their level of compulsion. So what can you do? Obviously, check with your clinical team, but here are some ideas. Number 1, pick your battles. If your child cannot sit, for example, or if they cannot lean back in a chair, does it matter terribly? Would it be safe enough to put this on the list of things to deal with at a later stage, if it doesn't resolve by itself? Number 2, while your child may not listen to you, they may respect the authority of a clinician. Make sure the clinician is precise. I recall a girl who continued running in spite of a very serious heart issue because the cardiologist had just told her to take it easy. Number 3, request that your child stays in common areas so that they are protected from secret exercising in their room. Number 4, use the gradual exposure desensitization approach. Every day, the time devoted to exercise or the number of repetitions is required to go down. Number 5, do some acceptable form of movement with your child. Everyone needs to move, and some people really need to move. It's probably in their genes. So wiggle or stretch with your child when they're stressed at the dinner table. Go for slow walks together. Choose a suitable yoga video or dance. It's probably good for your child to experience forms of movement that connect them with their body in a kind way. Number 6, your child may depend on exercise as the only way that they can cope with stress. Every time you support them to use another soothing strategy, you're moving them towards resilience from the illness. What about exercise in school? Find out what's happening and work out what's okay and what is not. And obviously, keep reviewing as your child gets better. It helps to know what's really going on outside home. I remember once a therapist told my daughter that she'd have to spend break times with the school nurse. This was to protect her from running around the playground, but a far greater force was her desire to fit in. She was doing the same as her girlfriends, and that was to sit on their coats and chat about the boys. How can you talk to your child about these measures that you're putting in? I make suggestions in the next clip. If you're going to put limits on the exercise your child does, how can you talk to them about it? How can you connect with your child with kindness? Because they live with such a level of distress that when we ask them to rest, they assume we're just being nasty. So depending on what is bugging them, you might empathize with phrases like, yes, I really can understand how that might feel like a punishment when you're already working so hard on meals. Oh yes, I can understand it really sucks at your age to have your freedoms cut down like this. Sure, you're wanting to fit in and join in the fun, is that right? Oh, you're worried about what your classmates will say. And when your child feels well heard and understood, you can move on to something like, I am really sorry. None of this is to punish you, you know. We're on your side, working towards the day you can feel free and get your smiles back. Tell me, what might make it easier for you to fit in while the sport is on hold? So that was all about you taking the appropriate level of control over your child's exercise. I've done another audio clip on supporting your child to move on to a better attitude to exercise. The compulsion to over-exercise, to compete harshly with oneself, to depend on a rigid exercise schedule, to use physical activity to compensate for eating, these are eating disorder issues. Let's assume you're past the stage where you maybe had to restrict exercise for medical reasons. What should you do about sports now? The way you help your child with food, taking charge at first and later guiding them towards autonomy, it's the same idea with exercise. If your child is emotionally dependent on exercise, you're going to look for ways to free them so that they enjoy movement, which is after all a human need and a source of joy. And your child will need extra wisdom because we're in a society where many messages around exercise and body shape are eating disordered. Some clinicians take the position that exercise should not be allowed for many, many months, maybe even years. They believe it could cause a setback for biological or for psychological reasons. So then the way forward is to guide your child towards other pleasurable activities like music or crafts or drinking with friends. Just joking. Other clinicians, and I think the research leans this way, my book will have the latest references. Other clinicians argue that treatment isn't complete unless there's support around exercise. If you don't give your child practice at normal life while they're with you at home, how can you expect them to act wisely when they fly the nest? Still, there could be concerns around certain forms of exercise. Was your child's eating disorder linked to a particular sport, perhaps even at a competitive level? Were they in a club where there's a focus on weight or shape? I know stories of young people who stayed eating disordered for years, and they found freedom once the parents stopped their high-level sport. Conversely, there are probably stories where the young person returned to professional ballet or gymnastics while making a full recovery. Where does the evidence point to? I only have a few stories here and there. Where does the evidence really point to? I don't know. If you can make your child's return to their beloved activity safe, I suggest you proceed in small, cautious steps and keep reviewing. If you find your child's mindset is deteriorating, then help them come to terms with letting go of this activity, or moving to another club, or leaving the competitive team. And that might be for the short or the long term. You'll have to work that one out. And although you may need to be firm, remember to also be kind about all the things your child is losing. They might be losing the satisfaction of using a skill, of feeling confident. It might be a whole social life that they're losing. It might be very sad to let go of a sport at a high level. A word about bodybuilding in case anyone tells you it's an antidote to a restrictive eating disorder. While a bodybuilder may eat large amounts some of the time, they also have months of drastic restriction in order to cut down body fat ahead of an event. It's hard to devise a more disordered way of eating. We are very far from a relaxed, kind, and free attitude to one's body. Remember also that bodies need a certain fat composition to function well. If you're looking for new types of exercise that might be a positive in your child's life, I suggest you go for activities that are sociable, part of a team, or that involve some skill or contact with nature. In another audio, I'll say more about how you might coach your child to shed their dependence on exercise and promote a positive attitude to their body. What do you think might be the drivers behind your child's over-exercising, their compulsion to exercise? What might help them shed their dependence on exercise to recover and gain freedom and joy in whatever they do? In other clips, I talked about when you might reintroduce exercise and what forms of exercise might be better than others. I'm assuming you are now beyond the stage where there are any medical issues due to malnutrition. You're more likely to be in phase 2 of a family-based approach. To help your child move to a free and happy attitude to movement and exercise, I suggest you start off getting to know their attitudes, their beliefs, what might be tense, unhappy, compulsive. If you can, have conversations. Be interested, non-judgmental. This is teamwork, ideally. Hopefully, these conversations are also going on with the treatment team. To help you listen out for issues, I'll list some common ones. And as I do so, note how quite a few are normalized in our society. So that's going to be confusing for your child. And note how quite a few make your child feel better in the short term. So why should they let go of them unless they get great support? So what might the issues be? 1. Exercise or movement is compulsive. Your child feels awful not doing it. 2. There are rules around how much exercise and when. If work or play or an injury threatens the exercise regime, it's agony. Usually exercise wins. 3. There is some secrecy and probably some shame around quite how much exercise is going on. 4. Exercise takes up all of the lunch hour and that feels better than a leisurely lunch. 5. Out with certain hours, when your child allows themselves to rest, they feel guilty, restless, irritable if they're not moving. 6. Exercise goals get out of control. Whatever level of effort or repetitions or duration achieved one day, that becomes the new minimum. There is no such thing as enough exercise. More is always better. 7. Reducing exercise feels really wrong. It makes your child feel lazy, fat, a slob. They hate themselves for it. 8. Your child is dependent on exercise for their mood. It's the only thing that makes them feel good, and they have no other coping mechanisms when stressed or unhappy. They may need to keep increasing the exercise to get the same mood boost. 9. Exercise is used to compensate for calories, to atone for eating more than they think they should have, or for self-soothing when they feel fat. 10. Your child's focus is on toning their body. This part must be smaller, this part must be bigger. They have to look just right to feel safe and included in their social group, and there's a lot of competition out there for the perfect body shape. 11. Competitive sport is the main way that your child feels that they have value. Perfectionism drives them to get better all the time, to stay on top. They can always fit in another hour in the gym to improve themselves and feel worthy. 12. Your child may have found a like-minded community in their club or at the gym where they are praised for their dedication, and their body tone or body weight. 13. Exercise is a form of self-punishment. Your child feels they do not deserve to feel relaxed, to feel joyful. Their motto might be no pain, no gain. So you see, there are many possibilities of what's actually driving the excessive exercise. It might not just be the simple idea that it's to burn calories. So have the conversations, and if your child is still at the stage where they can't communicate very openly, you might have to make guesses. In the next audio, I'll suggest approaches to making exercise a positive in your child's life. In another audio, I suggested what might be driving your child to exercise in a compulsive, tense, or regimented way. If you let them keep their emotional dependence on exercise, or if you stop them from exercising altogether while they're under your roof, how will they ever get to appreciate that there are better ways to live? So what are your tools? How can you coach your child towards a transformation in their mindset about exercise? As always, start with connection, empathy. Acknowledge what your child gets from whatever they're doing, what needs are met, and how it might feel like a loss to do otherwise. You can have conversations to develop your child's self-awareness and to educate. You might want to help them become aware of the vicious circle that they're in, or how stuck they feel, or of how they are not achieving their goals. For instance, are they building more muscle to feel that they're an acceptable person and they have a right to live in this world? Go slow. You can't do these things in just one conversation. Now, talk is rarely enough, as you've probably learned when it comes to food. So you might need to be more hands-on and to use the principles of exposure and desensitization and brain rewiring. For example, if your child feels terrible breaking a rigid exercise routine, help them to break this challenge down into smaller steps and help them to do so over and over. Offer plenty of distraction and support, of course. You could make it a habit that exercise always comes with extra nutrition, and this might counteract your child's urge to use sport to burn off a previous or a future meal. It also makes sense because your child's appetite may not yet be reliable. That could take quite a while. So they may not get the extra hunger that most of us would get from exercising. You might not permit the use of Fitbits or whatever phone apps are logging every calorie supposedly burned. I hate those damn things. You could coach your child in many other strategies to self-soothe when they're anxious. You could organize for them to discover many other ways to have fun, to feel confident, to feel part of a group. You could introduce them to activities that help them to be in tune with their body, that value kindness to your body, respect of your body. This is why treatment centers often offer yoga or some forms of dance. Now, in a good yoga class, they might learn to stretch to a pleasurable level and let go of competing against themselves. They might learn to do something just because it feels great, not to outdo someone else. Don't be naive though. Some yoga classes are all about losing weight or about being competitive. You could model how to respect the body's fluctuations in energy. When you're tired, make a big show of putting your feet up and avoid labeling yourself as a slob or a couch potato. Indeed, you might want to give some thought to how you define a life-enhancing attitude to exercise. For example, I like to live in choice without any shoulds, so my exercise has to be pleasurable, make me feel alive while I'm doing it, and relaxed afterwards. It must engage my interest by being in nature or using a skill, and some of it has to be sociable. You might be different. Perhaps you like to exercise solo to clear your mind, for instance. I think it's worth thinking about all this so that you can guide your child. Hopefully your clinical team is working on all this and they may have a therapeutic framework regarding exercise, such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Or they may just tell your child to stop or resume exercise without great attention to the beliefs, the fears, the motivations that drive the dysfunctional exercise. In that case, I hope this audio is giving you some useful pointers. I say pointers because, to my knowledge, there is no method out there that will swiftly change what's going on inside our children's heads. We're talking about changing not just habits, but beliefs, attitudes, and the whole emotional landscape. For our children, it's likely to be a journey more than a sudden revelation. Note that all this can also come in really useful when your child is well and you're discussing relapse prevention. You would ask your child to reflect on which aspects of exercise might go wrong and how would they know and what would they do about it. Many therapists and parents will teach you to externalize your child's eating disorder, to visualize the illness as an evil external being separate from your loving child. This model, this metaphor, might be useful to you, or it may do more harm than good. In this audio, I will tell you what externalizing is and why your therapist might be using this imagery. Now, at the beginning, parents are in shock. It's a scary illness, and their sweet child really does look like they're possessed by a monster. Maybe your child lies and negotiates their way out of every mouthful. Maybe they spew out hate. That puts you in fight or flight, and you want to shout back how fed up you are with them. Now, that is really counterproductive. And if we have any certainties at all about good treatment, it's that your child does not benefit from blame and accusations. They need your love and support as they're called upon to do very hard things. So the idea of externalizing is that we direct our hate, our anger, our blame to this metaphorical demon. So you're busy telling the therapist, after all we've been doing for him, we discovered that Kyle is still hiding food in his pockets. And the therapist corrects you and they say, you mean the eating disorder is hiding food in Kyle's pockets. Some young people like externalizing because it makes them feel like they're not such a bad person after all. They really get it that nobody is blaming them. It's not their fault. They have an unwelcome visitor, and they may even enjoy giving it a name. So there might be a lot of talk like, so then, what did Voldemort whisper in your ear? My daughter did not relate to externalizing talk, so we abandoned it pretty soon, except for a few short days when she would whisper, when we get home, are you going to tell me I have to eat lunch? And that if I don't eat it, you'll have to give me even more food? I took that as a rare hint that she was needing ammunition against an internal bully. If memory serves, I checked, are you whispering so your voice doesn't hear? And she whispered, yes. And then I think I said loudly, well, you have no choice. You have to have lunch because otherwise I'll have to give you more food. So externalizing may have those benefits for you and your child. I also see many problems with it at various times, so I will share that with you in another audio. Whenever I speak of externalizing, I'm voicing my views, but there are also researchers and reputable eating disorder therapists who bring up similar issues. What's important is that you go for what makes sense to you with your child, and if possible, in collaboration with your clinicians. In another clip, I explained what the externalizing model is and why so many clinicians prompt us to use it. Now, I'll give you one reason why your child might resent that model. It might just add to their sense of alienation, and if so, you could perhaps feel free not to use it. I've spoken to parents who felt quite glad to have that freedom. Just to remind you, the externalizing model invites you to see your wonderful child as separate from the hateful eating disorder, so that you don't blame them and they don't blame themselves. Okay, so the problem I most often see with the model is young people who do not relate to it. They feel misunderstood and alienated when we use it. We tell them, "You don't like milk? That's the ED talking." Or, "You can shout how much you hate me. I know that's not you. It's ED. You are not ED." And our children yell back in utter frustration, "I am me. I am the one who gags when I drink milk. I am the one who hates you." In other words, when you insist on externalizing, they feel even more misunderstood than normal, and the communication lines are cut. A model that was supposed to help has become one more thing to fight about. So maybe feel free to drop it. You can just as easily say, "Okay, you're finding it very hard to drink the milk. I'm here to help you." Or, "Okay, I get it. Right now you're really furious and you hate me. I'm guessing that things are quite unbearable for you." And then de-escalating, "I care for you. I'm by your side, my darling. I don't blame you for finding this hard. Let's each keep doing our best." In another audio, I will suggest another downside of externalizing, and that's when your child does experience an eating disorder voice, but considers it as their friend. Some young people, I'd say a minority, but I'm not sure, have a sense of an eating disorder voice, maybe a part of their mind, or it might at times feel quite real. Some even give it a name, Ed or Anna or even Voldemort. As a parent, you may then be guided to make this voice to be evil. Ed, bad, you, my child, good. Which, by the way, is called externalizing, and I explain this model in another audio. If your child is happy with that, all's fine. I'm just going to invite you to notice if your child might be defending Ed or Anna or whatever they call it. This is because our children can be ambivalent about this voice, consciously or unconsciously. They might fear it and distrust it and experience it as a bully and want to be free of it. Yay! But it's not that simple. At times, it feels to them like their friend, their savior, their protector, the only trustworthy, reliable thing in their chaotic and anxious life. After all, eating disorder behaviors might have earned your child a lot of praise and satisfaction when they first started eating so-called healthily. This Ed that we insist on hating made them feel great for a while. There was a time in hospital when our daughter kept doodling the same disturbing figure. It was a face within a heart with long-lashed, beautiful eyes. But the eyes were also angry, threatening, vicious even. Friend and foe combined. A beautiful demon who loves, who promises, and who punishes you cruelly if you disobey. Mythology and movies are full of these, right? And indeed, most of us can probably relate to having parts in our mind, such as, on the one hand, part of me thinks paragliding might be amazing, and another part of me says it's a stupid risk to take. Usually, psychological healing comes from becoming aware of our contradictions, acknowledging the role played by all of our parts and not vilifying them. There might be the rebellious child part, the critical parent part, the firefighting part, the id, the superego. Loads of therapy models aim to integrate conflicting parts of our mind, and usually that means recognizing that they are trying to serve us. Maybe you hope to convince your child that Ed is pure evil. The risk is that your child reacts by defending this part of themselves that has sometimes felt like their only true friend. Or you might say unconsciously this part hangs on even tighter to its protective role. Now look, there are people who have recovered by externalizing the eating disorder and labeling it very clearly as the enemy. Every time they felt like restricting, they asked themselves, is this me or is this Ed? At this stage in their journey, they had made the decision not to obey Ed anymore. If this is how your child functions right now, great, go with it. You can say, let's just check. When you say that milk is disgusting, is that you or maybe Ed talking? But if your child is ambivalent, you might say, darling, I'm wondering if Ed is telling you to avoid the milk right now? And if your child says, no, it's really me, I feel like throwing up, then maybe don't contradict, just help them drink the milk all the same. Another example, when you catch your child exercising in the bathroom, instead of snarling, I hate Ed, you could try, is this Ed telling you you must do those sit-ups or maybe something bad will happen? Now, if your child tells you that Ed is persecuting them, you can say, I'm sorry, it's bullying you. Come, let's find something distracting. Conversely, if Ed is your child's friend right now, you can say, yes, I see, it looks like Ed is trying to bring you calm by getting you to exercise. Come, let's do something distracting, something to bring you better and more lasting calm. In a couple more audios, I will invite you to notice if externalizing makes you more blaming, not less, and if it affects how courageous and persistent you feel. Perhaps you're finding it useful to use the externalizing model, where on the one hand, here is your wonderful child that you love, and on the other hand, here is the evil eating disorder monster that you are intent on destroying. If so, I invite you to check that your child can actually feel your love. So when you're frustrated and your anger is bubbling up, are you telling your child, it's Ed I'm furious at? Okay, you might be doing a great job of splitting yourself in two, one side full of hate for Ed, the other side full of love for your child. But watch out, your child might still be interpreting your high-intensity state as, my mum and dad are angry at me. The externalizing model is supposed to help you show your child kindness. Is that what your child is experiencing? I think my daughter could only feel my unconditional support when I saw her, the whole of her, not her versus some imaginary enemy that I hated. If you are picturing an eating disorder demon, are you maybe saying things like, I will not negotiate with the eating disorder. If you don't finish your plate, I will take away your phone. On a parent forum, one mum asked, will that not make my child feel blamed and punished? The reply was, tell your child we are not punishing you, we are punishing the eating disorder which wants to control you. The mum tried that. Did her daughter feel supported? No. Did she feel punished? You bet. Did she manage the meal? Some of it. And then she had a meltdown and locked herself in the bathroom. The reason I'm telling you this story is that later this mother wrote to me that she'd had an epiphany. She wrote, part of me has been judging my daughter, and now I feel that I get it. She has not been taken over by a monster that I'm trying to vanquish. She is doing her best to manage the intense volume of noise within her head. Already this has reset our course. I am really getting the importance of connection, the relationship, and compassion. Sometimes I'm listening to a parent tell me how they hate Ed and will not be dictated to by a terrorist, and I give them the feedback that I am getting little jabs of fear, even though they're not addressing all this intensity at me. Presumably, my nervous system is reacting to their body language, their tone of voice, their words, even though I know they are loving and mean so well. Might their child have a similar reaction? If any of this resonates with you, you could consider that you are not slaying a beast, but walking alongside your child through the hardest journey of their life. I'll say more about that in another audio. Some more thoughts on the externalizing model. This time I invite you to check if slaying the ED beast is the metaphor that most helps you, or if you might be at the stage you do a better job, you get more energized from picturing yourself as your child's guide through a very demanding journey, walking hand in hand through fire or up a very tough climb. For many parents, the image of fighting an ED demon gives them courage, especially in the early days. At times, though, parents are very glad to let go of the metaphor, which they see as too simplistic for the complex risk assessments that we are making all through this journey. So, for example, a mum told me, I kept reading on parents' groups that I had to be stronger than the eating disorder, but I realized this was making me harsh and robotic. I was switching off from my child. When she asked for something, I would automatically think, is that the eating disorder talking? Because if it is, I have to say no. But sometimes what she was asking for was not manipulation. It was actually helping her to eat. Does it help you to think, we are taking charge so that the eating disorder sees we are stronger than it, or we're taking control so that our child does not get bullied by the ED? Compare that with, we are taking charge because our child finds it impossible to make wise decisions while they are in such a state of terror and confusion, guilt, and self-loathing. Same decision, so as long as your child feels your love, there's no right or wrong. I am just inviting you to notice if you get more energy, courage, resilience when you are a fighter, a tiger mum or dad, when you are in a state of fierce love. For instance, I found food hidden behind the sofa cushions. I hate Ed. I can't wait to get that cheating evil force out of my house and to free my child. Or notice if you are getting depleted from so much focus against the illness and it feels better to concentrate on being for your child. So for instance, finding food behind the cushions has made me realize how my son is still struggling. Clearly, he still needs quite a bit more support. A mum wrote to me, I was getting stuck in externalizing the ED and relating to it as something I had to beat or overpower. I know I have a little girl crying out for her mother to see her struggle, her fear, her anxiety and exhaustion, and to respond to all of that, yet at the same time not let her continue to starve herself. So of course, keep your focus. Food must be eaten, weight must be regained, whatever your mental model. For me, I found I could be more persistent when I gave my child my whole confident presence without trying to second guess what an imaginary terrorist was or was not trying to do. What's right for you and what's right for your child may evolve. When you're supporting your child towards autonomy in phase 2, check again. You may find it more helpful to be a coach than a demon slasher. Same if your child is an adult who is now willingly, more or less, taking your help. So every now and again, check what's working. So right now, what works best for you and for your child? Are you a beast slayer or a mountain guide, a warrior or a coach? Are you grappling with a monster who would drown your child? Or are you more like a lifeguard, rescuing your child when they just are drowning, then later supporting them to swim through stormy waters? Should you attack the eating disorder on all fronts at once? If you imagine the illness as a many-headed beast, Do you have to slash all the heads at once? Is an eating disorder maybe like a game of whack-a-mole, where you have to bash your mallet down on every plastic mole as it pops up? Or, to let go of these aggressive metaphors, is it okay or not to accept some eating disorder behaviors, to tackle them at different times? Or, if you allow some behaviors, does that strengthen the eating disorder mindset? I think that it depends on what's going on in terms of physiology rather than psychology. So if you manage to get your child to eat the required calories overall, but they try to compensate by missing meals in school, then I'm pretty sure that that's going to hold them back, because the big gaps between meals seem to activate the eating disorder mindset, presumably for physiological reasons. Another example, some youngsters step up the compulsion to exercise when they eat more. From a calorie point of view, that's a lot of wasted effort at meals, so that in itself could be a reason to work on having gentle walks instead. What about when the physiological argument isn't particularly strong? I remember grappling with this when 3 major things were going on for our daughter. 1, she was still finding some meals very hard. 2, she had to go to sleep feeling cold. She would tuck her duvet at the foot of the bed so that it only covered her legs. It was quite heartbreaking to see. And 3, she found it very hard to sit down, also very distressing to watch. With these 3 things, there was always a reason to be in crisis, a reason for her to fight us. So we asked for advice and we thought about pros and cons. And we decided to prioritize. Concentrate on the 3 meals, 3 snacks, plus sitting at times that were not too hard for her. We let our poor girl go to sleep cold and covered her with her duvet once she was asleep. Now, we were trying to make pragmatic decisions based on priorities, risk assessment, and what would give us the greatest benefit. Maybe we could have done more with greater skills. Maybe not. It worked for us because we could focus on renourishing her and make life a little less miserable and let her be a little less stressed. Your wise decision-making might be different. I'm sharing my story because some people worry that if they don't slay all the beast's heads at once, they are strengthening it. They say, I don't want the eating disorder to think it's one. Or, will that not make the eating disorder happy? You are not battling a monster. You are not showing it who's boss. You're just trying to problem solve. There are enough uncertainties already, so don't add complications. Is it working? Is it not? And if it goes wrong, can you rewind a step or 2? Here's a clip where I'm talking to a couple of parents who are very keen to find a psychotherapist for their daughter in the hope that it will help her to cope with weight gain and that it will change the way she thinks and basically treat the anorexia. So this is where you're going to be learning fast, because as parents, when we first see anorexia, it looks like it's all in the head. The recovery from anorexia is very, very physical. It's a physical process. So the weight gain is absolutely essential. The regular food, no big breaks. So that's why there's 3 meals and 3 snacks. You don't want more than 3 or 4 hours between meals. That reactivates the anorexia. It's regular eating, it's weight gain, and that makes the psychological better. Yes, she needs the psychological support, I would say simply of her parents, which is, I'm so sorry it's so tough. I wish it could be easier. I'm with you. I empathize with her pain. It's tough. She's really sad. So this is big psychological work that parents do very naturally with kindness. If you sat her in a therapist's office, age 13, there is no tool a psychologist has that goes, okay, you can cope with the weight gain. There are no such tools. Maybe one day there will. I mean, I'm quite interested in tools like tapping, EFT or EMDR. There are tools that are used for trauma. which are not about talking, they're body-based. Maybe one day we'll have an evidence-based way of helping people with their fears of the weight gain. But at the moment, it would just be experimental. So it's just you have to go through the pain. You gain the weight. And what is your help is that with the weight gain, they get to fear the weight gain less because they become more rational. It's not like you can send your child to a therapist and the therapist does magic. It's the slow grind of eating meal after meal after meal, giving kindness, giving soothing, and then gradually exposing to normal life, which is the fear foods, the friends, the restaurants, school. That's also part of the treatment. It's exposure to normality. And of course, that's got to be done at home. Again, that's not done by talking in a therapist's office. So all this is often quite a surprise to parents who are new to this, because they expect that they can send their child to a therapist and the mind will be fixed in some way. And sadly, it's not working this way with the tools we have nowadays. I'm saying all this partly to reassure you that if you're like myself in the UK with a national health service and your child is not being given individual psychotherapy, it's not a cynical cost-cutting exercise from the health service. It's actually the best evidence treatment. It's the best you can get. It's for the parents to be in charge of the behaviors, of the eating, of the weight gain at home. Some introductory words about autism, and that's because it may well be that a fair number of people with an eating disorder are autistic. Not all, not a majority even, but a significant enough number that every parent should be on the lookout for the possibility that their child might be on the autistic spectrum. Why? Because it might alter some of the treatment. The knowledge in this field is slowly growing. Look up, for instance, the resources, some of them evidence-based, on peacepathway.org. Diagnosis is tricky because most of our children develop autistic traits, autistic types of behaviors, while their eating disorder is strong. For example, they get rigid, inflexible, attached to rituals. They think in black and white, all or nothing terms. And of course, they have high anxiety. There may also be some aspects of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. For many of our children, all this passes and they return to their old normal. So they might have had some background level of anxiety before the eating disorder, but they didn't have all these autistic traits or behaviors before they lost weight. So they will return to what was normal for them. For those who perhaps really are on the autistic spectrum, parents may recall signs from before the eating disorder, and it would be wise to flag them up. It would do no harm for all parents to have a look online at a very imperfect diagnosis tool, the Autism Spectrum Quotient. Maybe better tools will be developed in time, especially for females. If you think your child comes up with quite a few traits, then tell your clinical team, and it may help tailor how the treatment is done, individualize the treatment. How would an autism diagnosis change the treatment? Well, it might mean that if your child does better by having some choices around the food you serve, you work with that. If they need their meal in a particular place, with the lighting and noise level just right, then go for it. If they need a break from the table to move their body, why not? People with both autism and an eating disorder differentiate between the two. Autism is how they are and they become proud of it, whereas the eating disorder is something to be freed of. Sometimes they say they can't possibly eat something because of autism, knowing full well that it's because of the eating disorder. So there will always be some degree of uncertainty for the parents about how much to push, how much to expect, what is really going on. But then what's new? We parents are dealing with uncertainty all the time. As we learn more about helping autistic youngsters cope with anxiety and work towards eating disorder recovery, we get wiser about what might help all people with an eating disorder. So even if your child is definitely not autistic, look out for autism resources. It will help you learn more soothing skills. It will help you be more flexible and more attuned to what you can do to support your child moment by moment. It might move you away from using rigid rules that you've read in a parents' forum or a manual, rules that might not actually work out for your child. So, as most of our children have autism traits while they have an eating disorder, we can all learn from what is known about autism. And if you think your child does have autism, then learn everything you can about it so that you can really support them wisely. And here's an update, as I'm delighted to have more resources for you, for lots of ideas based on parents' experiences of how they problem solved and adapted treatment to suit their child's needs and strengths. Type autism in the search box on my website. When your child is very withdrawn and spending a lot of time in their bedroom and not communicating with you, or only with aggression or grunts, some parents wonder if their child is suffering from depression. And in this little clip, I'm suggesting, well, it could be, I don't know, but maybe there's also something very normal about it, and it would help your child to hear that. There is so much going on as people have the will to eat more and to not exercise. Maybe it exhausts them. Maybe they just need one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. They can't take 20 challenges. There's enough challenge just thinking, gosh, I'm eating normally. And our brain, when it is anxious, it goes into fight or flight, which is when she shouts at you or when she walks off. But when the body is really in some level of shock and exhaustion and fear, it can also go into freeze. My understanding is that this is a protective reaction of shutdown, and it conserves energy until the threat is gone and you know it's safe to be yourself again. So there could be a good, normal, physiological reason why you want to be isolated. It's a state of isolation. And fight and flight is also a state where everybody is my enemy. Everybody's out to hurt me. So it may be that it's okay to interact with friends by Facebook, but it's a bit more dangerous to spend time with them in case they don't like what I look like, in case they get bored with me.
Yeah.
I'm telling you all this so that if you get a chance to talk with her, you can normalize. A big part of depression and stress is that we tell ourselves we're a bad person. It's not normal. There's something wrong with us. We're stupid. We're bad. Part of compassion that a parent gives to their child is to normalize, to validate. You know, my darling, I don't know exactly what's going on for you. I don't completely understand you. And I'm really interested. I would love you to tell me more. What is it like for you? And, you know, if she says, oh, just leave me alone, you can say, do you know, I have been learning about this business of you wanting to be alone. And I want to tell you that, you know, maybe it's a very healthy and normal thing. Of course, you're still left with the issue of, you know, what kind of help you can give your son or your daughter. And I suggest something in another clip. A common issue with our children is that they become very isolated and they absolutely refuse to see friends. And sometimes they spend a lot of time alone in their bedroom. And as parents, we wonder how much to push and what's going on. So here's a little conversation about that. The state of fight-flight is an isolated state. It's me, and everyone's against me, and I'm cut off, and everyone's a danger, and everyone's blaming me and shaming me. And part of what you do may be empathy. So it would be, there's something that's making it hard for you to think of seeing your friends. I'm really interested what it is. A little tip, since you're so open to learning, we're getting a little bit specialized, is instead of saying, why don't you want to see your friend? Whenever you say why, try and replace with a what. What's getting in the way of you seeing your friend? It invites a bit more. So she might say, they're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm stupid.
Now, if you're like everyone else, you'll jump to reassurance. Of course they won't think you're stupid. They love you. They're your friends. Too soon. Empathy first. Oh, you think they'll think you're stupid? Oh, well, then no wonder you don't want to see them. Of course you don't want them to think you're stupid. We all need to have some dignity. I get that. And maybe as you give her a little bit of time, she'll come up with her own solution, which is incredibly gratifying as a parent when your child comes up with a solution which you wanted to impose on them. And she'll go, well, maybe if I saw one at a time, or maybe if I first texted them that I've had a difficulty with eating. She might come up with something, or maybe you still have a parental role in making these suggestions and in saying, I am inviting a friend, as you did. I love that, you did it, even when she said, I'm not ready, and it worked. We have a caretaking role as parents. And it might be that starting with the empathy, you can problem solve how to make it less shaming for her, less risky for her, to how she can inform friends. She could call it a difficulty with eating. It doesn't have to be called anorexia, for example.
Now, all this is assuming that the reason your child doesn't want to see friends is because they feel shamed, they don't know what to say to their friends, and you might have these conversations. But sometimes, and I cover this in another clip, the child seems to be more in a kind of resting, recovering phase. So they seem withdrawn, they're in their bedroom, but maybe it's not depression, maybe it's a necessary stage. So it's difficult for you to judge. Hopefully, the kinds of conversations I've just suggested will help you make these judgments. Is your child often isolated in their bedroom, refusing to engage with anybody, just on their computer? Should you push them to go out, or should you leave them in peace? There are no blanket answers, and here's a conversation I'm having with a mum about this. There was one interesting piece from her, which was that her daughter had very happily gone on a school trip, and apart from that, constantly in her bedroom.
Let's think about this. You and I don't know if it's good for her to be really freedom in her room to watch Netflix, or if she does occasionally need a little nudge.
Yeah.
Like the school trip came from an external source. It may be that you can give her some reassurance if you are able to talk to her about, a lot of people are still under some level of shock and exhaustion from all this. So maybe that's why you're finding a need to be in your cave and not interact very much. It could be good for you. You can show you're on her side by saying,
yes,
there may be something in there which is very healthy, that you are in a healing phase. If you had broken your leg, the whole weight gain phase is about having your leg in a plaster. Now the plaster has come off, and it's not normal yet. You need time to walk on your leg and rebuild the leg that is now mended. Yes, and at this stage you would get physiotherapy, you would get rehabilitation, and you could say to her, it's normal that it should still be difficult, and that you're not just all happy and life is easy yet. And at the same time, you've shown that you are a girl with amazing life force. You may still have a role in going, I would really like you to come and help me buy shoes or walk in the garden. This is the guiding, the structuring role of parents. The art is who do whatever you do with a lot of acceptance of her emotions. I'm tempted, if it was mine, to say, sweetie, I actually don't know what's good for you. I don't know whether what you really need is this complete rest and you're watching Netflix. And meanwhile, you are healing, like the broken leg. I have a little worry, my darling, that you can also miss things that will help you be happier.
Yes.
And so
yes.
just for today, I'm going to ask you to come and do this with me. Let's give it a try and let's see. Are you willing to do that? And you could say, I really want you to do that. Some parents do it.
Yeah.
You will. I have invited your friend. Or you can say, are you willing? And she might say, no, Mom, I don't want. And you say, I'm still worried for you. And I'm really trying to think what might help you. I don't need your help. Okay, tell me more about what's going on for you so I can try and understand you. What does it feel like when you're watching Netflix? Oh, I'm fine. So, well, when I watch Netflix and when I've watched the second and the third and the fourth movie in a row, I feel pretty rubbish. And I kind of wish that someone had told me to get off the sofa.
Yes.
Does that happen to you? Oh, yeah, a little bit. Okay. And so you might try and draw out of her where she feels bad, where it doesn't really work for her. If everything works for her, it's a question of time. And you can say, with time, you will want to go out in the world because you're that kind of girl.
So a little update about how that went. About 10 days later, when I spoke to the mum, she said there was much less aggression or hysteria or screaming. They had now got a bit of a structure based around schoolwork, and they had roped in one of the school teachers for that, so that the daughter was now meeting with her parents daily with a bit of a structure, that this was really useful. They also managed to get her to have showers and also to greet visitors to the house. What they didn't manage to do for a while longer was help her actually get out of the house unless it was to go once a week for a short while to school. And then another update about 3 months later, all was pretty well, pretty normal and pretty well and happy, with the girl being healthy and having really healthy behaviors as well. I'm creating several audios for you on the subject of weight restoration. What weight should your child be? You could call it target weight, healthy weight, goal weight, ideal weight. And words like BMI and 100% and percent weight for height will come up. What this is all about is getting your child to the weight and body fat composition your child needs in order to be healthy, not just physically, but also mentally. This can be alien to people coming new to this subject because of two things. One is that in our society, with the dieting and exercising culture, there's a message that we can choose our weight and body shape with no adverse consequences. So it's quite alien to a lot of people that weight and body shape are biological imperatives. The second reason why this is a confusing subject is that there are statistical charts, BMI charts, BMI calculators, so-called ideal weight calculators. You'll have seen these and they're probably displayed in your doctor's surgery. Too often, calculators or apps use just one number and they say, that's the weight you should be. And with your child, they might call it the ideal weight or the target weight, without realizing that's not the ideal weight for your particular child's biology. So in the next few audios, I'll go into more details so that you are much better placed to work out what your child's needs might be and to discuss it with clinicians. This information isn't just in my audios, it's also on my website. If you use the search box for weight restoration or weight target, you'll find pages I've written with generous amounts of references to what experts are saying, so it's not just from me. And I know that some clinicians have changed what they're doing because parents have pointed them to those pages. And that's what was needed to get the young person unstuck onto total recovery. This issue is really important because too many people are being allowed or even encouraged to stay slightly underweight or very underweight. And when that happens, they may be physically just about okay, but mentally the recovery isn't happening. More about this in a very practical way in the next few audios. Parents sometimes ask me if it's essential that their child is weighed. For some, it creates so much drama, such distress, and all for what? So here I'm going to give you my thoughts for the first phase, the refeeding, renourishing, weight recovery phase. And in other audios, I'll talk about weighing in phase 2 and beyond. These are my thoughts, and do listen to your clinicians, as they may have good reasons to see things very differently. This applies to all my audios, of course. So my understanding is the only reason we weigh regularly in the refeeding phase is so we know if we're feeding enough. Typically at home, we're aiming for a gain of 0.5 to 1 kilogram per week. That's 1 or 2 pounds. We don't know ahead of time how much food or calories will give us that, because it varies from person to person, and it also depends on how your child's metabolism is at this particular time. So most often parents need or like the feedback from a weekly weighing. Same for the clinicians, I guess. They might feel very uncomfortable if they don't have hard data to monitor progress. Also, as I explain in another audio about blind weighing versus open weighing, they might be doing open weighing as part of the psychological work. Now, perhaps this standard way of doing things does not work for you. For instance, you already know that your child is not gaining weight because meals have only been partly successful. You're working hard on that. And whenever your child is weighed, the meltdown is so terrible, they eat even less for several days. So what's the point in weighing? Or you might be in a great routine where meals are going really well. You know that so far they've produced a good rate of weight gain. You can sense your child is making good progress in mind and body, and you're thinking, why rock the boat? Because maybe last time your child was weighed, there was a setback that was hard to recover from. Parents in this situation would very much like to pause the weighing routine. As always, you are the expert on your child, and a good clinician is the expert on the treatment approach. So discuss pros and cons together, and I hope this will lead to a great way forward for your child. In this society, we tend to think that it's possible and desirable to have a lean, muscular and light body. It's like, if you don't like how your hair looks, you can get it cut and you can get it dyed in any color that you fancy, and your body isn't going to complain. Likewise for weight, we pick out a number out of thin air, or more worryingly from a website's calculator or a chart at the doctor's surgery, and we decide that that number will be just perfect for us, in the same way as I have found the perfect number for my hair color. However, our body does seem to care very much when it is underweight, and by underweight I include people who are very muscular but with insufficient body fat. A body needs to be the weight it needs to be, something that's described in set point theory. What comes over very clearly with an eating disorder is how being underweight affects all the body, including the brain, which means how people think. The mental state, the mental well-being, cannot be restored until the body has recovered weight and body fat to whatever level it needs. A better analogy for weight is shoe size. We might see a beautiful pair of shoes in the shop window, but if our size isn't available, we don't attempt to change the size of our feet. If you think of ancient foot binding practices in China, I think that reinforces my point. There's a little bit more flexibility around our body weight, but not that much flexibility. Another analogy. Have you tortured yourself with the message that we're all supposed to get 8 hours sleep? Or is it maybe 7.5? And yet more and more people are realizing that the need for sleep is individual. There is a bit of a cluster, around 8 possibly, but there is a range. Some people need a lot less, some people need a lot more. And if you try and squeeze yourself into the norm, you're not going to be well. In the same way, if you're consulting a chart with a weight or a weight range labeled healthy weight, it may not at all be healthy for you or for your kid. The chart or the calculator is just displaying the middle of the range. Yet our weight needs are determined by our genetic makeup, obviously our sex, our age, where we are in our life cycle, and so on. Human beings come in a range of body sizes. We can't tell anybody what weight they should be just based on whether they're male or female or what age they are. And yet, that's exactly what's being done by these charts at the doctor's office and by these internet calculators. What they are doing is the equivalent of you going into a shoe shop and saying, just give me your average shoe size. More precisely, the median, the middle of the range, also called the 50th percentile. The same with body weight. When someone reads a number off a statistical chart or a calculator, they're saying, your perfect weight is the same as everyone else's perfect weight. It's right there in the middle of the range, the average, the median. One size fits all. And yet, by definition, only a few of us are average. Imagine we line up 100 kids the same age and sex as your child. And we know there can be a range of heights, so we're not going to line them up in order of their weight, but in order of their BMI, their body mass index. What a calculator does is the equivalent of us saying, see that kid right in the middle of the lineup? That kid's BMI is what my kid needs and what all the other 99 kids in the line actually need. Now, what are the chances that every kid that passes through the clinician's office needs to be at that same middle point, that median BMI, that 100% weight for height? Maybe your child naturally sits among the 50 lighter kids. In that case, they will be very well served by the BMI churned out by a calculator because they will be generously weight restored. Statistically, this is the happy situation for half of our kids. Conversely, and this is the tragic bit I want to make you aware of, statistically, half of the kids need to be above that median number. Half of the patients are being kept underweight with a physical state that might be good enough, but not the mental state. This isn't just theoretical. There's a lot of experience of people who only made a full recovery once their weight had been brought up significantly higher than the one-size-fits-all BMI or weight for height. And if their weight dropped again, the symptoms returned. More on all this in my other audios. If your child has lost weight, there's a very simple instruction for you right now, which is make it a priority for some weight regain rapidly right now. Later on, you can worry about what the weight target should be, if there should be a weight target, etc. And some of my other audios will guide you with that. But if you're at the early stage where your child lost weight, it's a no-brainer that the first priority is weight regain. Gaining weight after weight loss is necessary for your child to feel better physically and mentally. They can't recover without some weight gain. And it's also what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. In the early stages, progress physically and mentally comes from regular nutrition and weight gain. So parents who are new to this think that psychology will sort things out, but very clearly the general rule is people who have lost weight need nutrition first, and that feeds the body, which includes, of course, feeding the brain. The body needs nutrition. The body is in shock from having lost weight. Remember also that a child or teenager's body weight is supposed to keep increasing. You get adverse physical and mental health effects when they lose weight or even when they flatline. That's another reason to get going with weight gain. So in all the complexities of this treatment, if your child lost weight at the early stage, you have a clear priority, which is, am I doing what's needed to make them regain weight as quickly as possible right now? And as quickly as possible means typically at home between 0.5 and 1 kilo a week at least. And in addition to weight gain, you're aiming at giving nutrition regularly so that the body stops operating in famine mode. So the usual recommendation is frequent meals, no big gaps in between. So typically 3 meals and 2 or 3 snacks every day. The advice which I explain in another audio, that if a youngster has lost weight, the first job, the first priority is to re-nourish regularly for weight gain. This applies even to youngsters who lost weight after having been considered overweight. So even if they are now at what might be labeled a normal weight. You can worry later about how much weight they will need to regain, but at this stage they need to regain some, if not all of it. Indeed, many experts recognize that youngsters who were previously labeled overweight or youngsters who are now extremely muscular can slip through the cracks of the medical system because non-experts see them as now at a weight that looks average on their charts and don't realize quite how medically unstable these youngsters are because of their weight loss or because of the loss of body fat. So you have an urgent re-nourishing job to do so as to attend to physical needs as well as mental needs. As a result, you should see improvements in both domains. So, get going with weight gain, with regular meals and snacks, and then you'll have time to gather more advice on how much weight gain. Sometimes our children agree to weight gain as long as it can all be muscle. This may be an attempt to satisfy their problems with body image, and it may also play into their exercise compulsion. So I want to be clear that for health, the body needs a certain amount of body fat, and that's the reason why, on the whole, our children, when they need to regain weight, need to regain body fat and not just weight through muscle. We tend to glorify a muscular body, but that doesn't mean it's a healthy one. Indeed, young people who are very much into bodybuilding and have a lot of muscle and very little fat can be extremely ill, and that could be missed because they look fit and they weigh plenty. They can be ill physically, and they can also be in great mental distress with compulsions and obsessions, which we know well from people who are underweight. So don't let muscularity fool you. And don't let your underweight child convince you that by going to the gym, they're going to achieve weight recovery. They need help to be re-nourished and to regain body fat. I want to clarify that weight restoration is essential. It's absolutely necessary to obtain recovery, and it's also not sufficient for most people. Certainly, most people find great improvements physically and mentally as weight goes up, but achieving weight recovery rarely signals the complete end of the eating disorder. What you've achieved is the first phase of the treatment. Then you gradually interweave the next phase, which in family-based treatment is called phase 2. Phase 2 is all about practicing normal. It's exposure to fear foods, to fearful situations. It's about getting back into normal life, school, interests, etc. And of course, it involves your child learning to eat in a normal way again without you being in charge of everything. So there's no doubt a lot of brain rewiring happening. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense that your child will need to relearn and re-practice all this in a safe and loving way, and that it's not just going to happen by magic just because they're weight restored. So it's an absolutely essential phase, and I guide you through it in these audios and also in my book. I'm telling you this so that you don't stop everything as soon as you get weight restoration. It can be an issue. There are therapists who tend to discharge patients extremely soon after weight restoration as if the job was done. So if you've been told that your child is weight restored and they're still not recovered, that's not a surprise and no reason to worry. You're still on track. There is a lot more that you can do to support your child all the way through to complete recovery. what are the pros and cons of telling your child of a weight target? In this audio, we begin with the cons, and in another audio, I'll outline some pros. People with an eating disorder tend to be very obsessed with weight, and recovery means not being obsessed with weight. So there's an argument for just not going down that road. We're talking about good nutrition, we're talking about the body's needs and general well-being. Another point is this: weight is just one indicator of health, and on its own, it's a pretty poor one. When your child starts being better physically and mentally, then you'll have achieved your goal, whatever the weight is. Our children tend not to obsess over their iron levels or their B12 levels. We can get tied up into knots because we're trying to talk about health, and yet we get drawn into just talking about weight, trying to win some kind of logical discussion, when actually this is a topic that our children are very fearful about and can't be logical about, can't engage with the nuances, the uncertainties, and tend to want to manipulate in order to get reassurance. Indeed, this weight target is very uncertain. It can only be an approximation. For one thing, it's a moving target because a child or an adolescent is growing. So the minute you've given a figure, it might end up being wrong. Another thing is, it might be wrong simply because we don't know. There is no scientific way of predicting what weight will correspond to someone's excellent physical and mental well-being. We can make approximations, but there's no certainty. And people with an eating disorder tend to want certainty. And if you give them a number, they're likely to get anxiously fixated on it. After that, it will be very hard to give them a higher number. Before you jump to the conclusion that you mustn't talk about a weight goal, I will present the opposite arguments in the next audio. And the key thing really is to discuss it with your clinician so that you can make the best possible decision of what will suit your child. Should you discuss a weight goal, a weight target with your child? In the previous audio, I gave arguments against that. Here are now some arguments for the opposite view. Well, one point of view is that at least the parents need a weight target, because sometimes they have quite an unrealistic view of the work ahead. They think their child just needs to regain a kilo or a pound or two, when maybe it's obvious to the clinician that a lot more is needed right from the start. So the parents may need a realistic weight goal in order to focus on the task. And it also gives them a sense of how long it's going to take. You know, if you think half a kilo to 1 kilo a week, you can do the maths. That's for treatment at home, by the way. What about the young person? What are the advantages of them knowing a weight goal? Well, if they're very interested and they keep asking, and if we don't answer, maybe we're giving a message that it's just too scary and that they can't handle it. It might be better for them to be educated in a very cool and rational way about weight needs being biological and not being a scary emotional thing. Of course, it's very likely to remain scary and emotional, but you're making some progress towards freedom from the fear of the number on the scale. And such freedom is, of course, part of complete eating disorder recovery. Some people with an eating disorder find a weight goal useful because they're actually working towards it. So for them, in spite of the ambivalence, it may be motivating. That doesn't work that way for everybody, but for some, it's useful. When a young person is given a weight goal, then it's really important that they understand that this is not a maximum number. It probably needs to be presented as a likely minimum estimate, an approximation, and it may well have to be adjusted upwards. We want to teach our children that there is no magic number to fixate on. Bodies operate within a range. The difficulty with giving a range is that our children can then transform the upper number in the range as their maximum, and they could work very hard at not getting anywhere close to that. And of course, if your child hears a number that will turn out one day to be too low, that's kind of harder. So a wise clinician who mentions numbers will hopefully make sure those numbers are really generous. Better for the young person to go through the fear and the shock and gradually settle their mind on a high number than fixate on a number that turns out to be too low, and then you raise it and they go through the anxiety and then you have to raise it again. Better to bite the bullet and give a high number. And if it turns out that your child is perfectly healthy at a lower number, then great, you'll have an easy time. And 6 months or a year down the line, they still won't be scared of that number as they grow. Something else to bear in mind, which I discuss in another audio, is that if the clinician is going to announce any kind of goal weights, those figures could be very wrong if they used one-size-fits-all charts or calculators. And so personally, I would only give my permission if the goal weight estimate has been individualized to my child based on their history, on the family genetics, and so on. So in this audio, I've given you the pros of announcing a goal weight. In a previous audio, I gave you the cons, and it really depends on how your clinician is going to present it. And of course, it may depend on your child's age, what it is that really worries them, what you think will work. So a parent-clinician discussion is always really important. There's also the question of whether every week or so they're going to be shown their weight or not, open weighing or blind weighing. And that's something I'll discuss in another audio. Should your child get weighed blind or open? Blind means your child does not know their weight. Open means that they see or they're told their weight. I'll give you some pros and cons, but first, to make it simple for you, if your child does not yet have a specialized eating disorder professional, I suggest you go for blind weighing. Okay, so pros and cons. For many therapists, open weighing is part of the therapy. Your child sees their weight, gets anxious, and the therapist uses this to explore beliefs and emotions so that eventually your child becomes free of the fear of the numbers. Also, if it's evident to everyone that weight is not going up, the clinician can focus the whole family on what will make the meal succeed in the coming week. It makes sense also to weigh in a relatively safe setting when you know that your child will find scales to stand on at friends, chemists, gyms, and even at the back of your wardrobe when you thought you'd done such a great job of hiding them. I'm speaking from experience. When research was done on FBT, with the approach written down in a manual, open weighing was used for all the youngsters. So you could say that open weighing is where the evidence lies. But not quite, in my view, because there is no study, as I'm recording this, to compare open with blind weighing in an FBT approach. Open weighing was just part of the whole FBT package used in research. Another consideration is whether the clinician is actually giving that therapeutic input, if they have the training and skills for that, or are they just weighing and expecting the young person to just cope. Next, some parents view open weighing as essential because it gives their child reassurance that weight gain is going as planned. The young person's internal sensations and their anxious mind could be telling them they are ballooning out of control, so the numbers may give them a reality check and help them to continue eating. The disadvantage of open weighing is that some of our children feel such horror when they see even a small rise that they restrict their eating or step up their exercising. This means that for a few hours or days after each weighing, there's not enough eating going on. There's chaos, tears, panic. Everyone gets exhausted when previously things were going quite well. Sometimes the clinicians don't see any of this because our poor children are just about managing their emotions during the therapy session, and the distress or fury is unleashed on the way home. Another disadvantage of open weighing is when our children keep focusing on numbers rather than leaving all those health checks to the adults. It's part of the eating disorder. I mean, our youngsters don't monitor their iron levels or heart rate, do they? So how wise is it to encourage all this micromanaging on weight? With my daughter, age 10, all the clinicians weighed blind on the basis that it's not normal for a 10-year-old to monitor their weight. When youngsters do know their weight, what can happen is they reach a number which to their mind is a maximum, and after that they regulate their eating to plateau there. Of course, the adults can push through with all their skills, but still, some wish they'd just avoided giving out numbers. So with all that, some prefer to weigh blind. If you've gone for weighing blind, you may decide later to move to open weighing in the same way as you expose your child to all kinds of fear foods and fearful situations, such as eating in public. I say more on exposure work and phase 2 in other audios. By then, your child is generally better mentally, and you'll be risk assessing whether they can cope with knowing the number without restricting. Remember also that the number must keep rising as our children go through growth. So if your child can cope with weighing this many kilos, the work is not finished until they can also accept that in 3 months' time, it will naturally have to be more. So open or blind weighing, pros and cons. As always, talk with the clinician. They are the expert on the treatment, and you are the expert on your child. If the decision is to weigh your child blind rather than open, how do you weigh blind without your child seeing, and what might you say afterwards? Your child steps on the scales backwards, and you try and obstruct their line of vision to the display in case, like my daughter, it turns out that they have bionic vision. Or you use fancy scales without a display that send out the data via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Obviously, read the instructions for the scales. You probably have to put them on a hard surface. You probably have to re-zero them, etc. Another precaution before your child steps on is that you know they don't have stuff hidden on their body. So whether you ask for your child to be in their underwear or whether you pat them down or you ask them to pat themselves down, it all depends on your assessment of what might be going on. Now, after your child has stepped off the scales, what might you say? Some clinicians say, your weight is going in the right or the wrong direction. Or they say, it's plateaued. Or if it's supposed to be steady, they might say, it's steady. That works for some of our children. And for some, the effect is just as bad as giving them a number. So with our daughter, we learned to just say, thank you. If she then asked questions about it, we'd say, I can see how you'd want some reassurance about this. Look, can you remember how it doesn't actually reassure you? We are taking good care of all this stuff. You can get on with your life. And then we went on to distraction. How do you know if your child is actually weight restored when their mental state is still pretty poor? If your child has reached what was previously declared their goal weight and their physical state is okay, their periods might have come back and maybe there are other medical indices of good physical recovery, but their mental state is still disastrous, or you might describe them as stuck, there's a good chance that they need some more weight, that the goal weight was just worked out too low. It's also possible that your child needs a buffer, an overshoot, a little extra for healing, and that's something I explain in another audio. But there are no certainties. It is possible that your child is actually weight restored, and what's missing is the healing effect of time and more work around behaviors and habits and fears. So all of the phase 2 work of family-based treatment. And to be clear, if you've not done any phase 2 work, then you would expect your child to mentally still be struggling. Weight restoration is very rarely sufficient on its own. But if you've done the phase 2 work and your child is still stuck, then you are dealing with some uncertainties, and it's really important that you keep speaking with clinicians about what you're seeing, the behaviors you're seeing at home, the fears, the distorted thinking, so that together you can decide whether it would be wise to keep going for more weight or whether it's more likely to be time and practice and maybe psychological work that will finally free your child of the eating disorder. Ideally, it shouldn't be a big deal to try for a little bit more weight and see if that helps. In practice, we often find that parents or clinicians fear what the young person is fearing. In their mind, it seems to be okay to err on the low side, but it's terrible to err on the higher side. Or they may fear the young person's reaction, whereas before they were perfectly clear about the need for the young person to eat in spite of the fear. So it's a form of thin bias or fat phobia, which we all need to be aware of because we're bathing in that juice in our society. If there's a chance that more weight will help, then we try it in the same way as we would try a different dose of medication until we find what suits us. In the same way as we would try another shoe size if our feet are hurting. Of course, you can expect your child to be nervous about that, but that's where our role as parents or as clinicians continues, that we are supporting our child to go through that fear and discover that it's actually okay. But there are no certainties. You might well reach a stage where you think, surely the weight is now fine, and what's more likely needed now is anything to do with my child's psychology and the wonderful healing effects of time, in which case our role is to be holding them safe and steady and as happy as possible and loved unconditionally while time does its magic. I want to explain the concept of overshoot. This is about weight possibly needing to go higher than what you would expect if there had been no undernourishment, and it would serve the body's needs for recovery, for healing, for some processes of readjustment, and then it will settle down again. This matters if your child is being given a goal weight or if they're stuck at what seemed to be a wise, well-estimated goal weight, but they're stuck. By the way, this is a bit different from simply giving your child a buffer in case of illness and to account for possibly a growth spurt. Here, I'm specifically talking about the idea of overshoot to meet some healing need the body might have. This extra might be 10%, it might be 2 or 3 kilos, and here's the evidence. The most striking type of evidence is anecdotal. It's from parents and clinicians who report that in particular cases, an extra few kilos or an extra 10% made all the difference. The other evidence we have is that the men in the Minnesota starvation experiment overshot by roughly 10% once they were allowed to eat freely. And then they tended to restabilize back down at their pre-experimental weight. Now, our aim is for our children to totally recover from an eating disorder, which means stability in their body, in their appetite, in their mind, in their thinking. So you could make two opposite conclusions from the Minnesota overshoot. One conclusion is that we should be the surrogate appetite for our children. So when they reach a weight which, from a historical point of view, seems to be suitable for them, we continue to set their meals rather than give them a complete free-for-all. And we do so for a few more weeks or months while everything settles. The opposite conclusion you can take from the Minnesota study is that the overshoot is something the body needs to do to meet its needs. So we've got to let it do that, and if we don't let it do that, maybe our child will be stuck with this kind of huge hunger and huge fixation on food because their body is saying, I need more. Now, there is a published paper examining the Minnesota experiment, which proposes a mechanism which would explain that the overshoot was indeed necessary, that there was an autoregulatory feedback mechanism that brought back into balance the ratio of fat mass to lean mass in their bodies. For a piece on my website where I give references to all this stuff, you can type weight restoration in the search box. There are no studies, as I record this, to assess whether people with an eating disorder really need to overshoot, or whether it's more dependent on individual variables, which would explain the anecdotal evidence. There are many, many, many experiences from parents who say, my child had gone through all the treatment that they would be expected to have, and still months or years later, they were still stuck in an eating disorder mindset, very rigid, very fearful of food. And then we convinced the clinicians to experiment with more weight, and it made all the difference. For some, it sounds like it was rather like flicking a switch. Their kid was back. Interestingly, none of these parents complained about their child then losing weight. I'm assuming that their child was growing anyway, so the weight never actually went down. Maybe what it did was flatline a little bit as they grew and then rejoined a normal upward curve. Of course, it's possible that from some of this anecdotal evidence, the real magic was time, or it was that the goal weight had been severely underestimated in the first place. But that does not explain every experience that is reported, and there are many of them. And nothing is simple. There is the opposite anecdotal evidence. So my daughter is an example of where time and life did the final bit of magic rather than an overshoot. She's also an example of how difficult it can be to raise somebody's weight when therapists are working against you. Because at one stage she was stuck mentally, and I very much wanted to try for overshoot. So I wish you more success than I managed to have in discussing these things with your clinicians. What if your child has been considered overweight, either before they started restricting or even now, currently? Every audio that I've made on weight restoration still applies to your kid. One big concern is that some clinicians can miss the health dangers and the mental dangers of a young person simply because their weight still looks normal on a BMI chart, on a population chart. Yet what really matters is what are your child's needs, and if they've lost weight, then their body is in deficit and at some level of risk which needs to be assessed. At some stage you'll be wondering, how much weight gain should we really be going for? Should we go all the way back up to where they were? Or should we consider that that was actually excessive? It seemed to be part of some disordered eating, and it would suit their body and their mind better to restore weight, but not all the way back up to where they were. The best advice I've seen about this from trusted clinicians is start with weight regain, and then you'll see later how it's going. You'll be looking for indicators of physical and mental health. One rule of thumb could be, for example, get them back to a minimum of 75th percentile BMI for their age and sex. So what that means is that if you lined up 100 kids, their age and sex, in order of their body mass index, they would be 75th along the line. So you're acknowledging that they are bigger than average. And that's fine. Most of us are not average. And then see how it goes. See if they're well or if you need to go higher. Once again, what is crucial is for parents and clinicians to be able to discuss this without being frightened of weight, prioritizing wellness over what somebody looks like or whether they're bigger than average. And of course, whether it doesn't conform to our fashions. I know it's hard for parents to get their heads around this, and it's obviously very hard for some clinicians as well. I write more about this on my website. Just use the search box for weight restoration, and you'll find some links to more wisdom on this subject. I speak to parents where professionals have presented periods as a real good, reliable sign of health. So it might be, we're going to get weight gain until you get your period. And sometimes they say until you get one period, or sometimes they say after you get 3 regular periods. And that will then be an indicator that you've reached a healthy weight. And then you can back off on the nutrition. There are also people who think that they are healthy because they have a period. Now, I knew that that wasn't right anecdotally, but I also base some of what I'm telling you on Jennifer Gaudiani's book, Sick Enough. She points out that everybody is different. There are a lot of people who are still extremely ill and they have regular periods. You can, at the other extreme, get a few people who have been really very healthy, weight restored, in recovery for a couple of years, and their period still hasn't returned. So there are other things that are an issue there. The main thing to remember is that there are many people who are very clearly underweight, are starving, are malnourished, and they have their periods. So don't let the return of menstrual periods be the only criterion that is used by clinicians. They need to look at the whole picture, and you can help them do that by describing what you observe at home about your daughter's well-being. And don't let anyone make promises to your daughter that as soon as she gets her periods or as soon as she has 3 or 4 regular periods, then she can stop the weight gain. That would be a really dangerous promise to make. One more word of caution. If your daughter had periods and then the periods stopped along with weight loss, then it's a sure sign that things are not good, that her body is saving all the energy it can because there's not enough nutrition. So that way round, I find it flabbergasting that some young women get discharged from treatment when their periods haven't returned and they're still full of symptoms, and yet they're told, okay, you're done, and the parents are told they have nothing more to do. There's actually a lot to know about what it means to have a healthy weight. How do you know? I've written some articles on that on my website, and I'll do a few more clips on that as well. I'm going to explain to you how a child's growth chart is used to get an estimate of a healthy goal weight. I really mean an estimate, and in other audios I've explained how much caution must be taken. However, your child's individual growth chart is a really good starting point, and I'll take you through how it works. If you'd like a visual of what I'm going to describe, go to a post on my website called Is Your Child's Target Weight a Gift to the Eating Disorder? And in there there'll be a link to some blank growth charts, charting percentile height and percentile weight, and I'm going to take you through an example of a 14-year-old girl. The blank chart is not telling you how much your girl should weigh, it's reflecting what actually is happening in the population. In this example, I have some data on this girl's weight at different age points. I plot them, and what I'm going to see most probably is that throughout all her childhood, while she was well and healthy and not dieting, this girl tracked along one of the percentile curves. Let's say in this case, the 75th percentile for weight. What that means is if you lined up 100 girls of that age by order of weight, your girl would be 75th along the line. It means she's part of normal human diversity. There is no reason at all why we should all be on the 50th percentile, which is the middle of a distribution, in the same way as we shouldn't all have the same shoe size, the same hair color, and we don't all need the same number of hours of sleep. Now, the principle we're going on, and it is an approximation, is that throughout our lives, we are healthy when we stay on that same percentile curve. So let's say that the last time this girl was weighed at 12 years old, she was fine on her 75th percentile curve. And 2 years later, she's got eating disorder symptoms. We weigh her and she's 50 kilos. She might panic because that's 1 or 2 kilos more than when she was 12 years old, the last number that she remembers. But actually, if you look at the chart, you can see she's really fallen off her weight curve from the 75th to the 50th percentile. And though the 50th percentile might be great for some people, it's not for her. For her, that's underweight. So you need to look up age 14, where would she be on the 75th percentile? and it looks like that would be about 57 kilos. But hang on, if it's going to take her 6 months or so to regain weight, let's look at the weight that corresponds to 6 months down the line when she'll be 14 and a half. And the corresponding weight on the 75th percentile is 58 kilos, 8 kilos more than her current weight. At the risk of boring you to death as I repeat this over and over again, any goal weight is just a rough estimate. You can also plot for height, and that will help you to see if your child's growth got stunted while their nutrition was insufficient. If that happened, then it's quite possible the body will want some extra weight to get the energy for a growth spurt. Let me remind you also that weight with a growing child is a moving target. You can see from growth charts how steep the lines are, and it can help you be on the ball as the months go by, how much the weight needs to go up. Let me be clear that there is no requirement whatsoever for your child's weight percentile to be the same as their height percentile. So while your child is very worried about being fat, you can absolutely dismiss that concern. A huge word of caution about using this chart to predict goal weight if you're aware that your child fell off their percentile weight curve during their earlier childhood. Maybe because the eating disorder started and they dieted much earlier than you think, or maybe they fell off their weight curve when they were 2 or 3 or 4 years old. For whatever reason, we don't know. So if you're one of these parents who say, we're all kind of an average build in our family, but my kid was always very slight, that might raise a red flag. Kids who fell off their growth curve when they were toddlers have been found to be more likely to get an eating disorder in their teens. The rationale may be they became underweight compared to what their body needed very young, and then the trouble manifested itself in adolescence. To summarize, if you've got good data from periods of your child's life where you know that they were genuinely well and healthy, then plotting them on a growth chart may help you estimate a healthy weight for their recovery. I used to think that weight calculators, such as those used by some clinicians, would at least give you a ballpark figure for your child's goal weight. However, a while back, I did some calculations, and I was shocked to find to what extent a goal weight might be underestimated when using a calculator compared to using a child's individual growth chart. In one example, I worked out a difference of 10 kilos, that's 22 pounds. And I could have picked a much more extreme example. Nobody wants to underestimate a goal weight by 10 kilos. That makes these BMI or weight for height calculators quite dangerous. In this audio, I take you through the example, and if you're more visual, you can see it on my website. Search for "Is your child's target weight a gift to the eating disorder?" I picked pretty much at random the example of a 14-year-old girl who used to track on the 75th percentile for weight. She's lost weight, dropped off that weight percentile, and she's now weighing 50 kilos. From her growth chart, when you plot it, you can see that if she hadn't lost weight, if she'd stayed on her weight curve, she would be at 57 kilos. And if you look in 6 months' time, because it's going to take her time to regain weight, we're aiming at 58. Let's compare that to the number that would be churned out by a calculator that looks at median BMI, 100% weight for height, and that calls the result ideal weight. All you would need to input is this: that she's female, that she's 14, and her current height. The calculator looks up the median BMI of girls her age, uses her height to then work out what weight that corresponds to, and it comes out with this magic number: she should weigh 51 kilos. So you can see the problem that she might get the impression that even after all her restricting and weight loss, she only needs to gain 1 kilo. Very different from the weight estimation from the growth chart of 58 kilos. But it gets worse. When clinicians input the data into one of these calculators, they use the person's current height. And yet that height might be insufficient. It might correspond to height stunting because the person was undernourished for a while. If you do calculations with a lower height, you're going to get a lower weight. In my example here, we're now going from the 50 kilos if she wasn't height stunted to 48 kilos if she had failed to grow in the last year or so. So this girl has got a very unambitious weight target, and yet her body will be needing the energy and trying to catch up in height. Now, if nobody is looking at her growth history, they won't know that. So this girl would be told, "You're 50 kilos right now. That's great because your ideal weight is actually 48. And of course, she would think, "Oh my gosh, I'm overweight." So can you see how this girl could be given an ideal weight, a goal weight of 48 kilos, 10 kilogram less, that's 22 pounds, less than the goal weight you would read off her growth chart? That is the danger with BMI or weight for height calculations. This problem that I'm flagging up, this underestimation of a goal weight when you use a calculator compared to a child's growth history, this will occur in two situations. One is, as I've just shown, height stunting, and the other is if historically your child's BMI has tracked above the 50th percentile. In the example I've used here, the girl's BMI historically was on the 60th percentile. If your child is in this situation, I hope that you can discuss all this with clinicians, because some of them up to now have not questioned this result that is churned out by the calculator and that is so misleadingly labeled ideal weight. Some parents manage to have fruitful discussions, and with others it's very difficult. In that case, the best you can do is to request that your child is not given any numbers, to agree to use a wait-and-see approach so that your child doesn't hear a figure which will turn out to be insufficient. I'm going to explain what BMI and percentage weight for height mean, because these terms are used by clinicians and some parents don't dare to ask. BMI is quite well known. It's body mass index, and it's somebody's weight divided by the square of their height. It's easy to find a calculator for BMI on the internet. The official definitions of obesity or of being underweight are based on BMI cutoffs. All the same, BMI doesn't correspond very accurately to our appearance, which is the bit your child is probably worried about. And an individual's BMI doesn't even predict their level of health. BMI is a statistical tool to analyze what's going on in big populations. So it's really tragic that the charts and the online calculators that promise to tell you your ideal weight are actually just BMI calculators. They want every single one of us to be on the 50th percentile for BMI, in other words, bang in the middle, or within a small range on either side of that. So it's a load of nonsense. It's a bit like saying everyone needs the same number of hours of sleep, or everyone needs the same shoe size. We have exactly the same problem with weight for height, except that, thank goodness, someone has made an adjustment for your child's sex and age. Weight for height is a measure of a child's BMI relative to the middle BMI of a whole population of kids the same sex and the same age. The reason weight for height was introduced is that we know that BMI varies enormously throughout childhood. That's why little kids look chubby and cute, and then they stretch out as they become older teens. So people have decided you have to look at a particular sex, a particular age, and then you look at the range of BMIs within that category. And the middle number, the median BMI, corresponds to 100% weight for height. If your child's BMI is 90% of that, then their weight for height is 90%. In a normal population, half the kids are above and half the kids are below 100% weight for height. There's a few weird ideas going around. For example, some people are under the misconception that 100% weight for height means that you're on the same percentile for height and for weight. That's not the case. So if you do the maths, as I have, sad person that I am, you could find a 16-year-old who is at 100% weight for height. She's on the 3rd percentile for height. She's short, but she's on the 12th percentile for weight. Should you want to calculate your child's weight for height, and I don't know why you would, except to check what your clinicians are talking about, you would have to calculate your child's BMI based on their weight and their height. And then you'd have to divide that by the median BMI for children of the same sex and age. You would look that up on a statistical table, and then to make that a percentage, multiply by 100. But after going to all that trouble, it wouldn't even give you a good ballpark figure for a goal weight for your child. I take you through that in another audio. If you're finding it hard to keep all these concepts in your head all at once, you're not alone. I speak to clinicians who don't seem to quite grasp the concepts either, but they're not worried because they share among each other calculators which do all that for them, and which also hide, therefore, what is actually being measured. There is a big problem when clinicians say your child should be 100% weight for height, or we're aiming for 95%, that will be plenty. That ignores the simple maths that half of their patients statistically would naturally be above 100% weight for height. Some clinicians are under the impression that there are published studies showing that 95% weight for height is fine. They're misinterpreting what's happening in studies that use 95% as a criterion to compare one treatment against another. It's a way of comparing apples with apples, but it's not saying that apples is what everybody needs. James Locke, one of the authors of such papers, has said very clearly that in clinical practice, target weights should be individualized. So now that I've explained BMI and weight for height, let's hope that in your child's treatment, you never hear those words. Here's a very quick overview of what happens after your child is maybe weight restored, maybe they've just been discharged from an inpatient unit. Here's an overview of what still needs to be done. And if you're getting family-based treatment as per the book, then that's called phase 2. Phase 1 being the phase of intense renourishment, refeeding, weight gain, regular meals while you are in charge, or if your child was in hospital, while the hospital gave them no choice. So what's the next phase about?
It's about I can learn to get used to my weight. I can find out that my weight doesn't keep going up because I'm eating normally. I can learn what a normal portion is, food portion. I can learn that friends like me, all the things
Yes.
I've done while I was ill.
Yes.
So there's a lot to learn, and the parent's role is to guide that. And
Yes.
say, help yourself to the food and I will guide you. And if
Yes.
it's not enough, I will tell you, so you get used to it. So they
Yeah.
have to learn normal life, and they can only do that at home.
So that's the outline of phase 2, the baby steps, the experimenting, the coaching for your son or daughter to relearn normal life and get confident in it, and for the brain with all its plasticity to rewire and really finish the treatment, really get well. When your son or daughter has been told that they have reached a healthy weight, that they are weight restored, then there's more psychological work that needs to go on in their brain. Here goes.
What can happen at this stage is they're weight restored and they think, I should now be happy. And yet I am still thinking about food all the time. I'm thinking about my body shape all the time. I'm still in torture. And now I also don't like my body. It can be a hard phase, and especially you'll have maybe seen on forums, there seems to be a bit of a myth that weight restoration is the end of the problem.
On top of that, when someone has been refed for months and maybe ill for quite a while, they have really forgotten how to eat normally, how weight just does its own lovely fluctuating around a very nice place. They think they have to keep everything in control or they're going to just keep on gaining weight. Because for the last few months, when you've been helping them to get refed, they have gained weight. So for them, this is a completely new experience of, I don't need to be hungry and restrict my eating in order for my weight to be stable. That's a whole new learning and practicing and coaching. And the more they do it, the more the brain presumably rewires itself to think, okay, this is okay now. So we parents have a very active role to play in facilitating these experiences and coaching our children and giving them a lot of empathy around their fears as they experience this new phase. And yet, strangely, this is actually a time where a lot of our children are discharged from treatment. Well, the treatment isn't finished, and this is how so many times relapse happens. Once their weight's restored, our children also may still not like their body, although quite often they're actually okay with their body. They don't hate their body the way they did when they were very undernourished. So that's the good news. What is less wonderful is that being weight restored doesn't automatically mean, oh, I love my body, everything's okay. So that's a whole other issue, accepting your body, liking your body. I'll cover that in some other audios. The phase after weight restoration, after maybe discharge from a hospital, is really crucial, and very often it is bodged. The person is discharged too soon, or the parents get instructed to give them vast amounts of freedom and decision making that their son or daughter is actually not ready for, because the treatment is not finished, the mind is not healed, the habits for normal behaviors and normal eating and for weight maintenance are not ingrained. People just too often seem to get the impression that the work's already done and their child's supposed to just be well. Take the analogy of a broken leg. The refeeding phase where you've been in charge is like putting the leg in a plaster cast, and then the bone is mended. That's your child is out of hospital, or at home you've managed to get them to a healthy weight. They can eat pretty easily now that you've taken control of meals, and nobody can run around freely as soon as the plaster has come off their leg. They need some time to rehabilitate for the final healing to take place. Another analogy, imagine your house has been completely gutted by a fire, you've had to live in temporary accommodation and so on. And before you can really live normally in your house again, it's going to have to be mended, decluttered, and made habitable again. Another analogy would be a car that is broken down, you've not been driving it for a while, and then you get back to relearning to drive this car or a slightly different model. So these are all examples of how things can get fixed, and we need to adapt to the new situation. We need to readapt after the fix. And until we do so, the fix is in no way complete. I often hear people talking about relapse when actually it's just that sadly this work was never really done. And very sadly, there are therapists who just don't get it. They discharge very quickly and they don't guide parents to do this phase. It may be because they're trying to free up space in an overcrowded schedule, or it might be that very genuinely they think that your child is ready, that you are over anxious, that you need a little push to let go. They may have got that impression because your child puts on a great show in the therapy sessions. So your role is really important in bringing facts to the therapist. Where is your child still struggling and is not ready for you to step back in a drastic, major way? Otherwise, the message parents get, and most dangerously that their son or daughter gets, is you're fine now. You can now make all your food choices. You can now live completely normally, and you don't need your parents anymore. And when that is done overnight, really suddenly, really quickly, with great big chunks of freedom, the typical story is our children start losing weight and restricting all over again. What you need is guidance to help your child take these baby steps towards learning normal life again, so that it's not done too suddenly, too rashly, so that you can actually coach your child, guide your child, and help them learn. So you still have a role in this coaching. This is not about backing off. This is the guidance that you need. And if you're not getting it, because so many therapists seem to not do this, you can still do it. When does phase 2 of treatment start? Phase 2 in family-based treatment refers to a period during which parents are less and less in charge, while the young person gets more and more decision-making back, the aim being for them to have autonomy in an age-appropriate way. If you look at the FBT manual, Lock and Lagrange, it says phase 2 cannot begin until the child's weight has reached a minimum level and until parents report no significant struggles with meals and demonstrate a sense of relief that they can manage the illness. So it is not accurate to say that phase 2 starts when your child is weight restored or close to weight restored. You need to see that things have become pretty easy and routine. Maybe you serve your child their breakfast and they say, "Do I have to eat that?" And you say, "Yes." And then they eat it quite happily. This kind of thing might indicate that you can move on to the next stage with breakfasts. I think it's unhelpful to think of phase 2 as some kind of cliff edge, where overnight it's all about giving your child independence. It might serve you better to think of phase 2 as blending into phase 1, like a series of hills along the journey. Anytime you and the clinicians see an opportunity to coach your child to return to some normal behavior, like serving their own breakfast, then you could decide to work on that while maintaining your caring, in-charge role in other areas that are still really difficult, like lunch, exercise compulsion, eating in public, and so on. There could be a very good reason to keep your caring, in-charge role for some more weeks, even while, say, breakfast is going well. That's so that you can coach your child to get comfortable with variety and flexibility. While your child is used to you serving eggs on toast for breakfast, it could be relatively easy for you to expand their world so that they can manage a croissant or waffles. In other words, to do work on fear foods. If your child is in charge of their own breakfast while they are still fearful and rigid, they might not be willing to expand their repertoire, even to change the type of bread used for their toast. So that would be a reason for you to stay in charge of breakfast, even though the current breakfast is actually quite stress-free. A word about weight restoration. As I said, it is not on its own a valid criterion for giving your child lots of autonomy, and in any case, we cannot be sure that a person is weight restored just by looking at a chart or putting numbers into a calculator, and I say more about this in other audios. When and how does phase 2 end? You might think it ends when you begin phase 3, but I don't think it works that way. Phase 3 is about attending to your child's normal adolescent development. Things like how they're fitting back into a normal life with school and friends and any anxieties and so on. Phase 3 work, from what I generally see, gets injected into the other phases, just as phase 1 and 2 blend into each other. If your child needs psychological help, or even if they're just needing support to reintegrate into school, I doubt you will be made to wait for phase 2 to be declared absolutely finished. So when does any of this end? My mental picture for phase 2 is of a dinosaur's tail, or maybe a crocodile's. A long tail with humps in it. The tail and the humps get smaller along the way. What you're probably going to see as time goes on is more and more normality and less to work on. And then you encounter a hump. A school trip is coming up, and as your child is doing well, it makes sense to say yes, and to make sure it goes smoothly, you take extra parental care, like buying emergency snack bars and discussing contingency plans with the staff. And then another hump might come along, like an illness or a breakup with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or a particularly stressful exam period in school. So these are all humps, hopefully smaller and smaller, during which we coach our children to deal with stress without resorting to restriction or compulsive exercise. And then one day you look back and you think, nothing has gone wrong for a very long time. Your child is happy, you have a really nice relationship, you're close, and they're also independent. And in my view, that's when you think, okay, phase 2 and treatment in general is probably all done. How will your child become independent and not slip back? In the first phase of treatment, you have brought your child back to health by taking care of them, by making many decisions, taking charge of their meals, exercise, and so on. How can you guide them towards independence and do that safely? How can you avoid giving more autonomy than they can safely handle? How can you have a safety net in place so that they don't slip all the way back? Well, you could think of the journey ahead as a series of carefully designed experiments. Carefully designed in the sense that if they fail, there is no great harm. As our own therapist used to say, if something didn't work out, you go back to the last thing that worked. You need to know if it's not working out. So if your child has a terrible meltdown when you ask them to choose a snack in a cafe, then you can guess it's too much too soon. And with that feedback, you might make it easier for them next time by giving them a choice, for example, between 2 familiar snacks. But what about all the situations where you're not there to monitor? So for instance, if your child has been needing one-to-one supervision for meals in school, and you both sense that they are ready to eat with their friends in the dining hall, how can you know if it's too much too soon? Well, you could, for now, have staff in the dining hall keep an eye out and report back to you. Yes, your child could still hide food. There is some level of risk. To reduce the risk, you might prepare your child to succeed. For example, if your child finds it hard to make quick choices, then for a while you might look at the menu together ahead of time. Sometimes you will not be able to devise a feedback mechanism that is immediate and precise feedback. For instance, the time will come when your child is probably ready for a sleepover at a friend's, which means that if things go really wrong, they will miss several snacks and meals. You're then relying on your connection with your child. Will they tell you how it went? And on their weight. Neither are super reliable, which is why most of us wait for things to be going pretty well before we allow a sleepover. If you think of the work as a series of experiments, it will help you to stay cool when something doesn't work out. You might say, Okay, darling, that was a useful little experiment. Not a problem. You'll be ready for this later, just not quite yet. We'll get back to the previous system for a little longer. The level of risk you take depends on how ready you feel your child is. Right now, your child might be ready to have an outing with friends in a cafe where they all have ice cream. If your child did not tell you the truth, that's just one snack, balanced against the opportunity to practice and to do something enjoyable and sociable. On the other hand, they might not be ready for a whole week away. So in my view, you can move forward without too much fear, without an irresponsible level of risk, by designing challenges or experiments where A, you get some sort of feedback, and B, the experiment can't fail too badly, and C, where you can go back to the last thing that worked. A few words about exposure and desensitization to fears. Fear tends to stick around and even grow unless you try doing the thing that you fear and experience that it is actually okay. With our current psychological tools, most of the time the only way out is through. I hope that one day we'll have techniques to make fears disappear in a more pleasant way. There might be some hope in some of the body-based approaches that exist for trauma, and if you have someone to help you and your child with these, then by all means try them out. However, right now, for most of us, most of the time, all we have is a behaviorist approach, as in the main phobia treatments, and rather crudely, the message is feel the fear and do it anyway. This is exposure, which leads to desensitization. The brain gets desensitized or bored because it's seen it all before. Put yourself in your child's shoes. The eating disorder has created many fears, and fear is so horrible that now you fear the fear. You'll do anything to avoid that awful feeling. I think of us parents as anxiety coaches. We become experts at walking through hell alongside our children, hand in hand, so that they know they are not alone and they have the courage to manage one step in front of the other. They have to go through fear, and our job is to make it manageable and be with them. And I trust that this means they will not get traumatized. The good thing is that our brains change, they have plasticity. It doesn't take long at all for fear to disappear after a few exposures, most of the time. New connections are made in the brain, old ones are abandoned. When your child asks, why are you torturing them with lasagna when their nutritional needs can be met with an easier dish, it might help them to understand the process. Have they ever got bored of going 2, 3, 4 times on the same funfair ride? That's how fast the nervous system learns that there is no threat, no call for adrenaline, no need for fight, flight, or freeze. An analogy for the brain's rewiring is tracks in the snow. Of course, our skis follow the deepest track. It takes effort to create new tracks, but the new ones, after some repetition, will become the easiest ones. Same with walking through long grass. The path we walk becomes smooth. With exposure work, I believe that the benefits tend to grow exponentially. The brain generalizes. If lasagna is not a threat, then anything that looks like lasagna is probably not a threat either. So you might find that after all the hard work on lasagna, any kind of cheesy pasta dish goes pretty smoothly. In other audios, I will offer tips to make this exposure and desensitization work as easy and kind as possible. How can you talk with your child about fear foods and all the exposure and coaching work to get everything back to normal? Life has become routine and smooth, and here you are making things hard again. Maybe your child says, "Why are you torturing me with this? I can eat loads of other things. I don't need mac and cheese. I don't need cookies. I don't need to eat in public." As with any communication, think of connect before you direct. So you might start with, "Yes, this must be frustrating for you. Other foods are so much easier for you now. I really feel for you. I'm with you, and I want to make this as easy as possible for you. How does that sound?" And they might complain some more, like, "But cookies are unhealthy and disgusting." And then you can empathize with that till you feel that they feel heard and connected. You want them to feel your love and care, even if they hate what you are prompting them to do. When you feel there's a little relaxation, a little connection, you can move on to the direct bit of connect before you direct. "You know, darling, this is going to become easy. Every day your brain gets a little bit more used to it, just like it gets used to a scary ride at a fun fair. This is the way to lots of freedom and pleasure." And then a direct prompt, the action you want them to take, like, "Take another bite, darling." If your child is receptive to information, to education, you can explain the process of exposure and desensitization. You can maybe talk about how marvelously adaptable our brain is and use analogies for brain rewiring, like tracks in the snow. You can remind your child of other successes they've had through action, either recently with the eating disorder or when they were younger. Were they scared of going to school? Were they scared of their first party? Isn't it amazing how all that has passed? The big picture, but you don't want to sound preachy, is that all these challenges lead to complete recovery. Perhaps an attractive way of talking about this is to enthuse about your child feeling free, enjoying flexibility, being fully in choice, having balance and a serene, confident mind so that they can join into a full and rich life.